5 o'clock. Board of Selectmen's meetings called to order. Town of Southampton, April 25th, 2017. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. The reason we're starting early this evening is because we're going to be going over the town budget, and that's going to take a while. We have no appointments, no hearings, no reports. We're going to open into basically old business, and I'm going to start off with the Fletcher's farm and the soil erosion project they have.
Thank you. Oh, color, it's easy, yeah.
Cheryl, I put everything on there for you.
Okay, am I going to be able to figure out how to?
You just nod to me and I'll move it.
Oh, okay. So we've been working on this grant with Food and Ag since November of last year. And the purpose is to address the soil erosion problem on what we refer to as the upper pasture. So this project is in conjunction with the Massachusetts Department of Agriculture. It's called the SARA grant, which stands for Stewardship Assistance and Restoration on APR programs, which means that our farm, for those of you that don't know, APR means agricultural restriction. And then the purpose is to help, the purpose of the grant program is to help resolve stewardship issues on land that is protected under the farm's APR program. So the approvals and partners, there's lots of players involved with this project. MDAR is Mass Department of Ag Resources. APR is the group under that, the restriction program. USDA, specifically NRCS, which stands for the Natural Resource Conservation Service, and then Southampton Conservation Commission. You folks are involved because of the town as a co-holder of the APR and as abutters to the property. And so the state wants to make sure that, number one, you folks are informed and that there are no objections to the project as proposed. So the problem, for those of you that have not been around for a while, there's a serious and ongoing soil erosion problem on the upper pasture that runs parallel to Route 10, dating back to the early 80s. Right now, there are severe washouts that are evident and expanding, and the land in this pasture is limited in this field is limited to pasture for the cows because of the inability, because of the amount of water to effectively work the land, example, mowing and baling hay. The solution that's proposed in the grant, tell me if I say any of this wrong, is the installation of a tile drainage pipe system along the existing diversion ditch, which on the map, if you look at the map where the first little yellow bar is, this map was prepared from NRCS after the site reviews that we were working on, along the diversion ditch that's there, and for the tile drainage, and then to move the water. What we're trying to do is to move the water off the field and move it to the edges of the field, and to where the natural progression of the water would be where it is now. It's just being forced to the outer edges and into the intermittent stream that already goes down where the water flows. It's the natural progression, and it goes into the land, the 8 acres that's owned by the town. So that's why we put there, parentheses, pipe is owned by the town of Southampton. So it's forcing that water along the edges with the hope that, again, the land will be restored back to productive ag. So that's the goal. The goal is to take the water across the field and get it off so we can have it be productive. The contractor that we've spoken with is a contractor, Donnie Bisbee Trucking and Excavation in Huntington. and he has ample experience with farm projects, specifically with the federal and state grant programs and field improvements. We very much appreciate the time tonight because we know the project needs to be completed by June 30th because of the state's fiscal season, or fiscal year. It is classified as ag maintenance. We have had numerous site reviews with the folks from APR and MDR. Conservation did come out. Marla and Bob Barkham represented Conservation to make sure that they could sign off. They need to sign off certificate of approval that because of the way Conservation holds the APR. So, so if you have questions, Bob can answer more detail on the drainage system, but that's what we're trying to do. So we're just asking, my letter to you folks last week was to inform you of where we're at. It got to this point late in the planning because we needed to follow all these other steps and make sure that all these other approvals and all these other plans were in place. And so now they just want to be certain, the state is saying, before we sign this contract, that we can meet all the obligations on our end, which means the project's completed by the end of June, that the grant, the funding for the grant, along with our commitment of financial resources, is enough to complete the project. They don't want it to, start and not be able to complete it. And the hopes is that it will take care of some of this water problem.
Very good.
Okay?
So you are looking for a vote from this board?
Well, they didn't say a vote. They said they wanted to make sure that we had addressed any objections.
You need to be at that podium or I get the phone calls.
The state APR group wanted to make sure that, number one, you folks were informed of the project, that there were no objections, that you folks understood that we're not changing the direction of the water on the field, but we are going with the natural progression, which is into the town parcel that abuts this field. So we wanted to make sure that there were no objections, and they said they needed an okay from the select board, so I guess they know it's on tonight's agenda.
Okay.
They know that we were presenting it because they won't sign the contract with us until they are certain that we've met all your questions.
Then my two questions are, one, is Conservation Board on board with this?
Yes.
Would you come to the podium? Well, I'm going to hear about it because people aren't going to hear what somebody said in the audience.
Marla Hank, Conservation Commission. Yes, I have been on the site visit with another member, Bob Barkham, with the people from the state and the federal government and the Fletchers, and we are totally behind it and have signed off on it.
Question while you're up there, Marla. When the project is done, do the same people go back out and just make sure it's all done? So you'll go back out, so that'll be
Post-project review, yes.
close to circle on that? Okay, great, thanks.
Cheryl, have you spoken to the Board of Health, given the old tire dump history out there?
Doesn't have anything to do with it, because what we were trying to do when we came last year, and if you remember, it was the first year of the SARA grant, and we brought it to your attention. So when we talked to the state, they said, let's worry about what you folks can control. So we wanted to focus on our land and what we could control, because we could apply for this grant. And so, yes, there are things further on, but this doesn't have anything to do with that.
That's all I want to hear.
Yep.
That's all I want to hear.
So it sounds like the work is on your land and just the water coming on town land?
Correct.
Going where
It's going.
Right,
already going.
right, it's just more of it.
We're just trying to get into the edges of the field instead of down the middle of the field.
And conservation's okay with it, which is, from my point of view, the key.
How come you don't ask him to come to the podium? I'm only kidding.
Mr. Fletcher, you want to approach the board? We were okay until you...
I just have a quick question. Just looking at the map, there's black lines. Are the black lines are those the ones that indicate where the drainage is going in the field?
The black lines are... So what? So now I need to call him up.
Look right here. You see these black lines that
Yes.
come in here? That's the drainage?
This one, there is gonna be a pipe put underground down the center of that field. It's gonna be down about between 6 and 8 feet down.
Yeah, and then these wings tie into
Right.
it, and then, okay.
Where we know where the flow of the water is, and so we're gonna have, there is, let's see.
Jackie, there's
there
another
is a
set of
diversion
minutes for
ditch,
Charlie.
which you can see from the road. It's been in
Okay,
place.
is that
for-
this right here?
It's now,
Yeah, I can see something in the plan right about here.
that's where the initial, probably the main line of the tile drainage is gonna go. It's gonna sit in that diversion. And it's gonna take the water, because of the natural slope of the land. It's
I'm
gonna
going to catch it, Velda, you can see this now.
Okay.
He's not by the podium,
We're
and
gonna go as far as funding will let us go.
Sorry, Charlie, but it's hard to, I can't see that map in detail.
I know,
Yeah,
okay.
thank you.
So it sounds like you need something on record from us.
I think so, yes, they just want to make sure it's
Make a motion to accept the proposal?
I'll make a motion, we accept the proposal as you indicated with the Conservation Commission's approval.
Oh, okay.
Discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Done deal.
Thank you very much.
Do you, Mrs. Flesher, do you want these back? Well, I don't know if you needed them. Sign them.
So, if they ask for any,
It'll be in the minutes of the Board of Selectmen. If they need some confirmation, have them contact the town administrator, and he'll just put a memo together.
okay, thank you.
It's on tape too, in case they want to watch.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, have you seen these people?
I don't know where that came from.
You gotta get zinged, Bob. If you don't get zinged once in a while.
I get singed every day.
All right. The next thing is the approval of proposed Article 1 of the bylaw revisions. I see a lot of red ink.
Good evening, Velda Goldberg, 26 Caitlin Way, and I am representing the Bylaws Committee tonight. The other people on the Bylaws Committee are Virginia Ahart, Margaret Larson, and Francine Tishman. And so what you're looking at here on the screen is Article 1. Where you see the deleted and the amended version of October 2007, that was already acted upon, but there are a couple sections like that that are still in the existing bylaws that are crossed out. So that would, in the final version, that would be removed. So pieces of this that we would like removed are crossed out, and pieces that we would like added are double underlined. And what you see at the end of each paragraph in parentheses, such as practice/language, that's our way of kind of keeping track of what the changes are about in that paragraph, and we hope that that will help the attorneys and help the Attorney General's office approve this easily. Most of the changes in I think almost all of them in Article 1, they're really to represent practice as it is or to clean up the language. There are really no, in our view, no substantive, revisions here.
You've done a lot of work with this, and this is only the first.
This is only the first.
No.
This is only, but maybe once we all get used to this, the rest will go a little quicker.
Looks great.
I'll make a motion to accept this.
I'll make a motion, we accept Article 1 as updated by the Bylaws Committee.
Second.
And could you, you're accepting, remember with our procedure, you're accepting this as a draft? This isn't your final acceptance,
So
right?
I'll amend it to say
Could you
the
amend it to
draft.
say draft?
Yes, I'll
thank
amend
you.
to say draft. Do you want to amend your
I'll
second?
amend my second.
Discussion.
Thank you very much.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So we will now put this up on our webpage, so if people listening at home want to take a look at it, go to the town webpage and go to the bylaws committee, and there'll be a link there that will go to the bylaws committee webpage. And you can submit comments there, and we'll put your comments up verbatim, unless you say anything really inappropriate.
Can I ask you a question? When I happen to do stuff like this, post a version that's redlined and then a clean version next to it. Because a lot of people have a hard time reading through all the
Oh,
lines.
okay, that's a good idea.
Would you
Yeah,
mind?
sure.
Okay.
Sure, that's a great idea.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's done. I'm going to take a couple of things out of order, only because of the fact that they just showed up. The next thing is a license request for a special license for wine and malt beverages. It's a one-day, and it's for Susan Alisi at Conan Park for June 24th from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. It appears all the paperwork is in order. Do I hear a motion?
You want to see it? Okay, I'll make a motion. We accept it?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved. The other thing that's been handed to me, and I don't know if you all have read this, these are the minutes for the Board of Selectmen for March 21st. Usually, Jim, you cruise through these, so I don't...
Yeah, I was ready last week, but
Right, I'm good.
I was too.
she wanted to review them.
I'm good.
Do I hear a motion to accept the minutes?
So move.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Jim, you want to sign these? Now we're going to move into, correct me if I'm wrong, the warrant for the annual town meeting. I've taken the updated draft that Bob Marco sent me, put it up on the screen, and I don't see Bob. This is going to be a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee. Well, why not? We can go through this fast. If there's something that's red flagged, we'll all know about it. You don't have the latest one? Well, I apologize for that. Okay. I understand. All right, well, this went out, I think Sunday morning, actually. All right. Yeah, but it's not fair to them, because I don't want them to just sit down and read it, you know? I don't know what happened to Bob. Would you mind finding out where he went?
Who sent them out, Bob? I just wanted to...
Yeah, Bob sent it out, so I don't know what happened there, but, I mean, I got it only because...
I have last week's version. I don't have the version. I didn't print it out.
I didn't print last week.
Okay.
I don't have it with me. I thought they were going to supply it.
Yeah.
I sent it out April 20th at 3:27.
Yeah, I have it. I don't have it here, though.
Oh, well, it doesn't have a date on it. I got an email saying this is the final version.
Yeah, on the email I got, Bob,
So,
it says the 20th
In
up
fact,
the
if you
top.
look right up at the top of the screen there, see it? And I believe I got that Sunday.
April 20, Charlie.
Yeah, bring that screen down a little.
20th.
Go back, bring that to the top again.
This?
No, scroll back up on the annual
Here it
town
comes.
meeting warrant, above that. No,
Here?
on the actual document itself. Yeah, go above that. There it is, right there. April 25th, right there.
So how did he send it on the 20th?
Well, this version says the 20th here. That says the 25th.
So it might be a little different.
The 25th,
This is the latest?
several articles were added that were requested today.
So the 20th,
One is a stabilization article
okay.
for sped expenses,
This is no good.
and we also added the override article, which would be Article 12. Having some printer issues, but I think we'll have copies shortly.
But that's what I mean, you guys haven't seen it, so it's like, you know.
Yeah.
All right, well, you want to switch into the actual budget then?
Yeah, I would say working,
Yeah.
I think tonight was supposed to be the budget, mainly.
Yeah.
Right.
You've reviewed this before. We just have those two issues, and certainly going through the budget first would make sense because there is another article having to do with a proposed override here. So,
Did you send out the 25th version to all of us, both committees?
no.
Okay, if you,
I did, well, after the meeting this afternoon,
okay, so you'll
I
send them out.
went down and revised it. Anybody that has a computer, I can send it out now.
Okay.
It's the same as the one that you've seen, except we added those two articles as a result of the meeting this afternoon.
What are the two articles?
There's been a request from the chair of the school committee to add a stabilization fund to cover unanticipated, unexpected sped costs for the public schools thing. Shouldn't be very controversial. The other one is, given decisions last night and further discussion this afternoon, the other article would allow the town to increase spending for the public, for the Norris School. We put in $200,000, since level funding removes that $200,000. So the public will have a choice of a level funded budget or one item for a general override of $200,000, approximately 30 cents on the tax rate. I just put this in this afternoon after the meeting, so. I'm sorry?
We're going to have to get to that podium, or we're going to be,
Francine Tishman, 83 Glenville Road, Finance Committee. And the budget we're going to be looking at tonight assumed the passage, or is the budget we're looking at tonight without the override dollars?
The budget is without the override dollars.
So if the override passes, what's the plan for the $200,000?
It would go exclusively to the Norris School budget.
From where?
It would be a general override.
Strictly from the override, okay.
Yeah, one item, no menu, one item targeted at the Norris School only.
Heather Pellegrini, Finance Committee. I just want to point out for everyone, as you're looking at the spreadsheet, column U, calculations of percentage increase or decrease is actually an incorrect calculation. It came out late in the day, but if you just do the math, the columns are reversed, so it should be, if you can put the cursor into one of those cells there, it should be T divided by Q to get your percentage increase from the fiscal 17, not divided by the new budget amount.
I don't know how to shut this thing off.
I want to shut a light off this.
Okay. I sent Vicki an email, but she probably already left or something.
yeah,
I was hoping we could get
I saw
it.
the email, but it was, she was.
Yeah, no, it's tough to really see what the actual percentage change is when that calc is not accurate.
appears to be lower than it truly is.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. For instance, that first line in purple is actually 34%, not 25%. And it's consistent through that spreadsheet.
You want to use this spreadsheet?
That's easily fixed.
It is
I mean,
easy fix, just
yeah.
copy and paste it all the way down.
Copy and paste, easily fixed. I know you sent out an email, but Vicki was gone,
Oh, no,
so
it's late, I know.
I,
I understand.
Yeah, here we go. You want me to copy and paste, and I can do a fix on that quickly.
Want to fix that now? Go ahead.
Yep.
Thanks, Randall. Oh, sir. On the way.
Just throw
There's no way to turn on just one row of lights in the back, is there? Charlie, is there any way to turn on just the back row of lights?
No, they're all wired to one circuit.
Okay.
Sorry. But it, we could put some nice lamps there.
I'm missing the drop down.
Budget was done in the dark.
Tell you what, Charlie, I'll do it on mine and send it to you.
All right.
Lights are out.
I don't think the percentages are really going to be the issue.
They won't.
Well,
Yes. There's extra revenue sheets, extra expenditure sheets, and there's extra warrants as well. I made
yeah.
copies.
Good evening.
Sorry?
No, yeah, go ahead. I'll get another one.
And there are extra agendas if you, even though we're.
I think one and the same. 'cause I
Gary.
know I did-
Gary. Gary. Oh, no. Don't say that.
I think these are the same.
You said no, don't say that.
Paperwork's driving me insane. Okay. These are the same, I think.
Okay.
Yes, that's the whole idea. I mean,
I remember when I
can't help that. If we get high definition television, then we'll be in better space.
yeah.
But then they're gonna have to replace the sets on some of the people's homes. That'd be the other problem.
Yeah.
You can't win this.
I know. So it's Article 12.
I'll say.
You're gonna let me drive this thing?
Oh, you.
Woogie?
Okay, I got it fixed here.
All right, well, we got it fixed on the screen, too.
Oh, you fixed it on
Mike's
the
got
screen?
it fixed, I don't have it fixed.
That's okay? You're
Okay,
Yeah.
everybody else set? Right,
Thanks a lot. Oh, thank you.
so
Extra.
basically, we've been reviewing the budget that came back from the Finance Committee. There were a couple of concerns that we discussed this afternoon. I'll let Bob get into the details of it.
Did you get one?
Bob, you want to do an overview of what we,
Okay. First item that was discussed at the end of the meeting last evening is that the town has, for the last couple of years, overfunded the budget for Smith Voc. The accountant did a calculation and estimates that we have $67,000 that will not be needed in that budget and can be used elsewhere. We then checked net school spending, and we will be required to use $8,000 of that to cover net school spending requirements, leaving approximately $60,000 that can be used for other purposes. Looking at the various priorities of the selectmen incorporated into the budget, what you have before you is a budget with 2% for employees, plus the contractual increases, and using some other changes, the selectmen are proposing that we do a 6-month trial of a second shift in the fire EMS department for advanced life support transport services. Those monies can be, and also some other changes with regard to the ambulance fund, not putting $25,000 into the ambulance stabilization, which was proposed earlier in the budget process, and also making the changes in the standby funding that was in the budget in prior years. The proposal is to seek town meeting approval for a 6-month experiment running ALS services through the ambulance. Did I leave anything out?
If you don't mind, I have a question. When did the select board decide that that was the proposal?
Well, I was just going to say that he said the select board,
It's not the
Correct.
select board.
It's not
It was
select
a
board.
discussion that was
Right.
going to come up at tonight's meeting. There's no decision of the select board at this point.
No one has voted on this. This was just something that came out of this ad hoc session that ran from, we thought it would run for a half hour, 45 minutes. It ran until about 4 o'clock.
So, just to address that, the budget in front of you is partially what we did last evening. There have been changes made.
Right.
They were made at the ad hoc meeting. I can tell you that as a member of the Finance Committee, I'm a bit disheartened that none of us were notified of the meeting. You essentially had the entire finance team except the Finance Committee representation at the meeting. We try to be very open. We try to be very inviting to all our meetings. We are offended that we were not invited or at least informed of it. And I understand it's an ad hoc meeting, but if the intention was to make major modifications or modifications completely out of how we designed the budget last evening, we should have been informed. And there should have been a stop at least. If you were going down a certain road, making changes, we should have been notified, at least conferred with about, this is the process. Because when we received this budget at 5 after 4 today for a 5 o'clock meeting, we're a bit taken aback by the changes. Now, you have the right to make the changes, but with 35 minutes to review before coming here, it becomes a bit difficult for us to wrap our head around the changes and to really look at, where the revenue adjustments were, where the expense adjustments were. So, right, after spending 3 hours as a group reviewing it last evening.
I mean,
I can tell you how this occurred, Mike. As you recall, last night at the end of the meeting, it was agreed that I would meet with the treasurer and the accountant at 1 o'clock today to review the changes that were made last night, do some updating of the numbers and so forth. That's what was planned. I then got a message from the chair that he would be in, and I just said, we're going to meet, so drop in. And then he said, I'm probably going to bring another member of the board. So it wasn't a planned meeting, but it just happened that, and we did not go in there with an intent to make significant changes. But in the discussion, and again, trying to fit the priorities of the Board of Selectmen that have been voted and reinforced a number of times into this document. This is how it emerged, so.
Okay. So just please note then that the budget in front of you is not something that the finance team is proposing to the select board, because major members of the finance team were not at the meeting.
Yeah, I mean, and I wasn't at the meeting, and I don't know if I agree or don't agree, but I was at the meeting last night for the 3 hours, and it's a little different than what we came out of that meeting with, so I know I want to hear the reasoning why before I can say, yeah, it looks good, because it's a little bit of a, I don't want to use the word shock, but it's, you come in and it's changed, you know, but that's why we're here. We're here to talk about it and figure out.
The whole purpose of bringing this in front of everybody tonight was to show that there were other approaches that we were entertaining. That's what we're doing. There's no decision that's going to be made tonight on the select board side that this is the final budget. That'll be next week.
Yeah, we did. I mean, actually, the meeting that Charlie and I had, I contacted him and said, are you coming in today? Because I think we need to talk about not executing the warrant tonight and not going forward with the budget tonight, because there's some things that we have to absorb, and moving everything to May 2nd, and that's how that
And I think that's
emerged.
That's what we discussed and agreed upon last evening, right, that it would go past today. I just think
That's,
we should have been notified. I mean, we set out with a plan. We did what we were chartered and asked to do last evening. We set out with a plan and designed something very close to a balanced budget, and then a different route was taken prior to it coming here. So the work we did last night, well, some of it is up there, a lot of it isn't. So it's just,
I think a lot of your work is up here, and I think we take great pride in the work you guys do. This is just a discussion to try to move things in a direction that the select board had voted originally as a priority.
okay. Then our originally level-funded budget that we proposed should be right next to the one that you modified today for review.
And that's the other part of the argument, the fact that because such a short window's been happening with this stuff, it's like the numbers aren't right because the formula's wrong. That just leads to the fact that there are some things that need to be cleaned up. The hope is you'll get this information tonight, you'll have a week to bring it back to us, and then next Tuesday, we'll be making a final decision. I do have one thing that sort of amazes me with the town of Southampton, and that's the fact that we have our election right in the middle of us setting our annual budget. I think we really need to start looking in the coming years to change our election to some other period of time in the year rather than this time. But that's my own pet peeve.
We requested the budget process start in October of last year. It took 3 months for it to actually start. And we're at this point not because of what the finance committee has done or what some of the finance team members have done. We're at this point because we didn't pursue the timeline that was originally proposed, and that's why we're at this crunch time. It's unfair to individuals to put that pressure when people have been stomping their foot and saying we need to start earlier for months, and we haven't. So, with that, I'm going to leave it to you to go through the budget and explain the budget and the line items to us and the rest of the public.
Well, is there a way that we can toggle between the one that was earlier today and then this version? Can we toggle between the two? Or put them both up on the screen?
Oh, we'll never see it.
I know. Need thicker glasses.
Buys one, there's, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but I believe this is the one that was sent out originally from your committee. Does that look right?
Could be. I can't read it out.
That's what I have.
It's not, it's a vision wrong.
What if we go to the bottom and check? Bruce?
Looks like it says 425 up there, Mike, on top.
Yeah, so that's what I sent out this morning.
Okay.
So the new should have revised at the end of the heading.
All right, so how do you want to do this?
Can we verify it by going to the bottom and seeing if his numbers jive with what he thought? Just scroll to the bottom. Does that look correct?
I believe that's yours, Mike. Well, I didn't change anything on that. I just took it from his email and dropped it onto this computer. Then I grabbed the one that was revised and threw it on this computer also. The problem is going to be that there's no way that you can visually,
Well, we have a printout in front of us of the one that was just modified this afternoon.
yeah, but
You can
everybody-
leave the original one up there.
No, it doesn't help anybody at the
Oh.
home. I think the best thing to do with this is to take and put another column in here and then go back to this next Tuesday and finish it off.
Charlie, I don't think that tab there, level funded except wages, was changed. I think the column that you have there, the tab that you have was changed, but right there was not changed. That is the column that
All right,
came out of last night's meeting.
well, I'm open to suggestions.
So a question, at the meeting today that you went over, did you change anything on the budget from the Finance Committee except for those 2 line items?
The salaries for the department heads that got the contracts was increased to their contract levels,
Okay, so it went from 2% up to the contracted value.
whatever that was.
Right.
Each one was different.
Okay,
And the fire department.
okay.
That was the only 2 areas. Oh, and the vocational school account was changed to bring money out of that. Was there another item that was changed to take money out of that?
Yes, the budget provided for a $25,000 transfer into the ambulance stabilization fund. That 25 would be reprogrammed for the proposed second shift.
So I've got a question when you're ready for him.
Okay.
A question I had is, you said that we put in half a year for the fire department, the second shift as a trial. I wish the chief was here, but my personal opinion is we're going to find it kind of hard to hire full-time professionals and say we're trying it for 6 months. If it's,
And nobody's full-time, it's all part-time.
well, we got to cover the second shift with people that we don't have. And again, I wish the chief was here, but it seems like it's going to be hard to attract the right people if we're saying it's only going to be for 6 months. And if we get the money, then we'll keep you on. If not, because people have to make career decisions and all that, so.
These are all filler jobs here. They're not,
Well, I don't know if they're filler jobs. Yeah, second shift, I didn't know if they're all filler jobs or the chief was planning to hire some people more long-term.
well, it looks to me like we're at an impasse here.
Well, not an impact. I think what we got to do, Charlie, is let's start going through this budget, and when we get down to the areas that the meeting this afternoon wants to make a change, let's go into discussion with these people, and then move on down through. I think that's what we got to do. There's not a lot of changes, it appears. It was just maybe
There is
4 or
a lot.
5 changes.
Yeah.
So if we start going through this budget, when you get to a point that you want to make a change, then let's go into discussion with them.
All right, so the question that I need, because I'm lost now on the map, is this the correct page you want for the Finance Committee's recommended budget that was submitted this morning?
the
Is this
new
the
one.
right
Yeah.
one? No.
I can tell by the state.
I would just stick to,
I can tell by
I
the
would
state.
go through what Vicki said, go through that item. I have the original in front of me. So if there's questions that come up about changes or things, I have all the information right here. We can raise the discussion. We'll just go over what Vicki said. It was the level funded plus tab, so I think it's in the other sheet.
The one he had up there said 425 revised, wasn't that the one?
That's the one, the
Yeah.
revised.
So the one that you had up there, Charlie, was the one they sent this morning, which should have reflected last night's meeting.
All right, well, you know what, I'm lost on the map here, so I'm trying to find them.
I think that was on your desktop.
Well, they're both on my desktop.
Okay.
Gotta close
Maybe we
both
should
of them
plug
out.
in Mike's computer.
Uh-oh, I just didn't save those changes, did I? All right, this is the revised one.
I think the one up top is the Finance Committee one. Right there. Budget,
That's 8:23 this morning, so that's gotta be the finance.
yeah.
Yes, that's ours.
So you want me to open that one, or do you want me to
Just
open?
go off Vicky's. I would recommend just going off Vicky's.
All right, well, here's Vicky's, and I apologize, but I didn't save the changes Mike just did.
Oh,
I didn't realize that until I shut it. Oops, what can I say?
we should have started at 4.
Hey, all I was trying to do is make sure the people that watch this on television would be able to see this, and I'm realizing that I'm probably better off put an overhead projector and a grease pencil.
So basically, we got to disregard column U, if that's incorrect.
I've got it. If you want, I can send it to you.
Oh, good.
Yeah, but
I can email it to you.
then I gotta open up my email and everything else. It's not, yeah, I mean,
Yeah, let's just disregard the percentage at the end, and can we go through it that way?
But I think that's a useful number for people to see what the change is.
Okay.
well, then Mike's gonna have to get up here again and change it.
Yeah, highlight the column and find
Sure.
and replace.
Okay.
Sorry, Mike.
So what was your question, Jackie?
So I wanted this is the new one, but I wanted their version. The old one.
We didn't print the old one,
Oh, okay.
but
But this is the Finance Committee's, I don't know.
I think this is the one I just printed tonight.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, so it's the
so
same as
it's
this
the
one?
same, yeah.
All right. But then, when they put this up there, it was the same thing. So there's just some changes in here that we already,
Yeah,
salary,
not
fire
much.
department, vocational, ambulance, stabilization.
Right.
That's it, right? And we'll just work it out through. All right.
Hey, Charlie?
It's saved, Mike. Thank you, Mike.
We have a little lull here, so we got an email today, and I don't know if, I'm just gonna read it, so we're taking up space here. It was the one to, Randall still here? It just, from Lori Dickinson saying, "I can't thank you enough for pushing to have the railroad tracks removed from Brickyard Road. Now that we have all started riding again, we are very glad the tracks are gone. I was very appreciative of you responding to my initial email and keeping me up to date on this matter. Thank you again." I know I went over them, they look good, so thanks. Pardon? Oh, cool.
So it's gonna be a high-speed bike path.
No. Still working on that.
All right, so we're back to the revised budget, top with the formulas corrected. I guess the easiest thing, Bob, is I think the items in red are the ones that were changed. Am I correct?
Yes.
So that'll be easy enough to see. The first thing that was changed was postage.
So starting at the top, the town administrator's salary, so that is level funded plus 2%. So if we are looking to raise that salary line item.
One of the discussions this afternoon on that was that, given the timeline it will likely require to hire a permanent town administrator, you probably won't have anyone on board at least until Labor Day. Not only will it take time to do the hiring, but selectmen are now adding longer-term notification requirements, so that you may hire someone and they'll say, I can't start until 2 months because I'm required to give a long notification. So I think that's a conservative number, I think, Labor Day. And so why fund the entire budget when you're only going to use approximately that much during the new fiscal year?
So that 58,000 would cover the percentage of work from Labor Day onto?
That was Vicky's estimate of.
And what covers the interim salary? The interim salary in the meantime? Is that a different line item?
There will be, that'll be covered also, but there's a significant savings over what the budget you were contemplating, about 85, and you may even have to go to 90, which is what the two consultants recommended.
So you're saying
Oh.
the 59 will cover you as well as a new person through fiscal 18, right?
That was the calculation, yes.
So how many months is this position being funded for?
It would be 9 based on a Labor Day start.
It's being funded for kind of 12 interim, then permanent, but at different rates.
Based on 85,000, 9 months is 63,750.
That does not include an
And that doesn't include
The interim, yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that's,
Is that right?
That number's got to go up.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a tab.
Mike, you need to probably get up to the mic, because
So there's a tab. If you tab over 3, you'll note that we left a note there, needs to be reviewed, in item V. So we have little excerpts, little notes here for the items from last evening. So we left a note, needs to be reviewed because it was pending this type of conversation. If we're looking at, what was the number for 9 months?
63.
63 plus an interim figure,
which is about 12.
so 12, 63 and 12 is 75. So we would want to raise that to 75, I would think.
I would just suggest that this calculation was done by the accountant, and
That number
I would
is-
like to hear her explanation for the
That number is only a 2% increase from the prior year's salary. That's the number I put in there last evening.
So the next one is postage. Bob, you have the notes, I don't.
Well, we had a discussion of postage, and obviously we're spending an eye-popping amount of money on stamps and postage, and there was a discussion of ways to try and control that, but the sense at the table was that we could, in fact, use the 17.5 rather than 18.5, which was originally proposed.
Any comments, questions, or anything? Okay. The next one's the town accountant's salary. That's a contract agreement. Questions, comments?
It was, so the contract in our budget,
You may as well stand.
in our proposed budget last evening, the contract increases for the 3 positions were not included in the proposed budget, the almost balanced budget that we worked on last evening. So they're being added back in. There's a 34% pay increase. It's your choice to add it in, and, you know, what we proposed last night was the 2% increases as agreed upon prior to any contract negotiations.
Contract negotiations were done in good faith. They were signed. They're a legal document. If we don't pay them, we're probably going to put ourselves in liability.
I have nothing to say. I mean, we were not conferred, nor was, I think any revenue increases considered when doing these, which I think does become an issue if you continue to add all of them together. We also discussed last evening about the commitment for the 2% and then the 2%, and then you contractually increase at some X amount percentage for an employee. Are they then eligible for another 2%? If you do 2% next year, are they eligible for that? Because then it becomes a serious inequality if we're bumping and then giving more 2%, so.
On the contracted employees, we specified it starts on, say, July 1st, and there's not an additional 2% as of that July 1st. So there's not an additional on top of that.
For FY18.
Correct.
But you have the ability to give them an increase in FY19 above the.
We have that ability, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, next one is the principal assessor. No, that was something that was coming out of the assessor's office. I can't speak to that to speak to it.
The principal assessor, obviously, one of the major considerations here is trying to keep people. We've lost 5 or 6 people in the 3 years that I've been an assessor out of the financial area, treasurer, collector, assessor's office. We've been trying to rebuild from scratch. And it's just false economy not to pay these people. We train them, they go off, they work someplace else. Principal assessor, basically what we did was to take the Don Jacobs, the classification study, which the Board of Selectmen accepted in general, and we took that as the rate, and it ended up being about a $40,000 a year pay for that position. The only one that I'm having a little bit of difficulty with right now is the assistant assessor, particularly since we've, on very short notice, shoved her into a very, position of having to run the whole office. And it bothers me that we're still holding that position down to $26,000. I know that when we submitted the request, even before the principal assessor got sick, we submitted the request, it was about $30,000, which I think is more appropriate, particularly considering the fact that this person is just one course away from being fully certified as an assessor, and she is marketable. We don't pay them, we lose them. It's as simple as that. I think if we raised it to $30,000, at least we would be, in the ballpark according to the Jacobs report. That's my recommendation.
The next thing we move into is the treasurer's office, the treasurer collector. Treasurer collector and the town clerk approached the selectmen about a month ago, asking about having their pays adjusted. We had a communication with town council. Town council advised us that they need to communicate with the finance committee. This is basically what we were told the town treasurer collector would like for a salary, and that's why that number's in there. I do not know if finance did any review on that at all.
No, it was never formally proposed to us. The numbers were changed after the original budgets were submitted, and we, other than seeing it in here, we never had a formal review or presentation to us.
Okay.
Received an email, right, I think?
You should have
Yes,
gotten
we got
an
an
email
email.
from me.
Yep.
But that was a month or two ago, basically heads up.
We left it in as we weren't really sure how the funding for those positions was approved, if it was approved by the budget process or if it was approved at the town meeting with those being elected officials, so we left it in as part of the.
My understanding is that it's approved at town meeting, but it goes through finance to set up what the numbers are gonna be.
Right.
And
So we originally had it in the budget, and it was part of some of the items we cut last evening, those increases for the balanced budget.
And, well, obviously, it's the same thing with the wage line item, and the same thing with the town clerk and the town clerk's assistant.
Well, why is the assistant down?
I do not know.
As is the wages for the treasurer collector.
So,
Oh, hi, Pete.
hi. The
It's nice
treasurer,
working in the dark, isn't it?
yeah. So basically, the town clerk assistant wages had, the original budget had 20 hours in it. So I took, she currently works 18, so I took whatever, the same thing with the treasurer collector wages. I took whatever their rate was for last year, times it by 2%, times the hours, times the 52.2 weeks, because my understanding last night was we wanted to just give a 2% raise, correct?
Yes.
Yes, that's what we.
So that's why some of those are adjusted. Because it wasn't just the 2% from last year. So that's truly what the town clerk assistant is at 18 hours times her rate times 52.2 weeks.
So
So,
they're not making less money.
no,
They're getting a 2% raise even though. Okay.
correct. Because I took their rate that they get now times the hours that they are scheduled for. So that's why that changed.
The next one was the town hall custodial wages. Bob, I'll let you articulate on this one.
A portion of the new town custodian's wage will be paid from the library budget. And so an adjustment was made there, reflecting that of the 20 hours, I believe 3.5 hours will be devoted to the library.
Francine Tishman, 83 Glendale Road. I guess what I'm trying to understand here is why didn't the money follow the position that was here? There was a custodian here, part-time, and the money came from a different department. Now we're basically adding to staff here, a half a position.
Unless it's taken out of the other.
Right.
Okay, it's been taken out.
It was to take it out?
There's a note Mike had from last night that we were going to take a half-time person to highway.
And it was? This budget reflects that? Because the one we saw last night did not.
All right, but Randall,
Because Mike made those changes and then sent them.
Okay.
yeah. Randall was at the meeting last night saying that. He's right here.
Okay.
So I just want to point out, Randall Kemp, Highway Superintendent, that if the Highway Department loses another half-time employee, it will be 1.5 people we've lost in the last two fiscal years or 3 fiscal years. So if someone can name to me another department that's lost that percentage of staff, I'd love to hear about it. So I thought we had a pretty elegant solution trying to fund the custodial position, but I mean, I guess it's up to you guys, but obviously my choice would be to retain as much staff as I can to get the work done that needs to be done. I just want to point out that we have lost staff that were not replaced. If we continue to do so, will suffer. Thank you.
So does this include a reduction in Randall's budget or not, based on what he said? I just want to make sure we're looking at.
Yeah, if you scroll down, go down to the highway section. Line 122, you see the reduced by half.
So let me ask a question, and I don't know the answer, Randall, but if it comes out where everybody wants you to take out the 10, and I'm not sure it will, can you do it on your expense side and live with that, or is that too tight? I'm just trying to get you with the staffing level that you need.
I guess the simple answer is, I guess the simple answer is we do as much as we can with what you guys give us.
Yeah.
I've been trying to look at the numbers closer to see if there's any line items I can bring down. It's possible, but decisions have to be made. If something's reduced,
Right.
we're not going to be doing that particular task.
I guess my suggestion is if we took it out of the expenses, you'd be able to maintain your staff, and through the whole fiscal year, you can maybe figure out ways to save that from expenses, so it wouldn't put you down any staff.
It's definitely worth discussing, and I am more than willing to entertain that option.
Okay, that'll leave you where you are for staff. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So would that be your recommendation, taking that 10, if we're going to take it from the expense side?
Yeah, there's nowhere else to really take it from.
Okay, but definitely not from the staffing side.
No.
Okay.
I mean, that's the whole point, is to keep the staff.
Yeah, and obviously you want it to stay in if possible.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Janet Kane, Finance, 83 Glendale Road. Again, we're not trying to cut down on the highways staffing. I mean, that was, their duties was janitorial, and they're no longer doing that duty, so I'm not sure how that impacts highway. So, and if they lost a person a year ago, I'm not sure why that occurred. I don't remember cutting them, but if you're not doing janitorial anymore, then it shouldn't impact your highway staffing. So I'm just unclear.
I don't know if should I discuss this in open? I just have questions about if I'm reducing someone's hours, is that, I don't know what the ramifications of that are.
Well, you'd have to go through the union contract and whatever is involved with that, of course. You don't want to discuss individuals right here.
Yeah, I don't know, can you keep that person? I hope so.
Well, is it possible to leave the money in the highway and just have this person build the highway and work for Randall? That's doing the janitorial?
Still the same thing.
I know it's the same thing, but it would, I don't know.
And we're trying to get it out of the highway department because nobody visualizes the highway superintendent as in charge of the custodial services of the town.
Yeah, I think he's just trying to work out a way that keeps everything.
Let's look at the expenses. I'd be willing to entertain that, see what we can squeeze.
Okay, technology, equipment, services, that's been reduced. Obviously, it's been reduced to try to shore up other budgets. Police department expenses. Vicki, can you explain that for us, please?
Sure. Vicki Morrow, Town Accountant, Pomeroy Meadow Road. In last evening's Finance Committee meeting, the premise was we were going to level fund from FY17 budget. But when Mike and I sat and did 18 budget, we level funded it in total. We just moved money from building expenses to departmental expenses because there wasn't a need. Hopefully there won't be a need. They got the condenser fixed last year. They had the retaining door built this year. So he just took that money out of the police building expenses and moved it to his departmental expenses because they're going to have new qualification regulations in order to qualify for shooting, and so they need different types and more ammo, and so that money was going to cover some of that. So I just made it a true level funded budget because the 33 got dropped down to 25, but the 54 stayed at 54. So he actually lost $8,000 in a level funded budget from last year. So I just put that back in.
Okay, I guess I got the whole fire department on there. All right, this is a contract agreement with the fire chief. This is the increase in wages for 6 months for the standby, if I'm correct, Bob?
Yes.
Hi.
Please.
Janet Kane again. I guess my question is, if we're going to do a 6-month trial, what are the objectives? How are we going to measure success? How are we going to determine if we're going to extend it another 6 months? Is that been worked out too before we propose this to the town?
The discussion we were having was to see if it generated enough money to legitimize paying to have that second shift. Obviously, if it didn't, then therefore, it's not going to work for us.
The question, I mean, the financing of this would be fairly complex. We have intercepts with the city of Easthampton, which we pay for. So presumably, they would be greatly reduced.
How many?
We had that number.
Vicky, was that $10,500?
It was,
$10,000 so far this year,
Yeah.
which is $275 per intercept. It was like 30.
So what percentage of calls do we miss? During what shift?
Well, obviously, if we don't have paramedics on, it would be second shift or third shift.
You still provide ALS service during the second shift. So if the right individuals respond, you still pick up the ALS tab.
Correct, but then
You won't be subject to
the 10,000 that we pay, we wouldn't call for an intercept if we have ALS.
Correct.
So the 10,000 represents the calls that we have not provided ALS. We didn't have that available, so they called in for an intercept. Not only do you lose the $275 for that call, average intercept call is around $1,300. So if you figure we're paying $275 and we're losing the $1,300 per call, that's substantial.
So what shift is that $10,000 from? Is it from the second shift or the third shift in the rotation?
Back quite a few months ago, the chief was here, and I believe it was in the upper 80% call capturing, that if we had a second shift, I don't know if I'm remember right, I think it was around 88%, I think, that if we had a second shift, we could capture 88% of our ALS calls. But
So what do we capture now?
was it like 50, 52 or something like that? I wish the chief was here to explain some of these things, but, and we were trying to get this number. What are we missing for revenue? And we just can't seem to get anybody to give us that number, and that's why we were trying to estimate it ourselves.
So in November, the middle of November, we had a meeting with the fire chief, and all the information being discussed right now, including revenue estimates, including lost calls, including intercepts, was to be presented prior to finalizing the budget and determining if we were going to do a second shift. So I would ask that that be information, including the revenue projections, be given out tonight as we're reviewing the budget. So no revenue projection. So we would be funding a second shift for 6 months with no projection of what revenue it would bring in. The funding listed here is actually not half of the original funding requested.
No, it's not exactly half.
It's not half. So, for instance, the
budget we looked at last night, I believe, had 89,000 for the full year, didn't it?
the line items were different.
So,
So, to review what was originally proposed, which is proposed in this budget, if I may, the budget for fire department wages, right here, you have listed at $149,658. And the difference between last night to this night is $73,000. That is $15,000. The 149 is $15,000 less than what was originally requested. If you go down to the ambulance EMS expenses, The request is for $45,000, compared to the original request of $59,000. So I'm curious as to how is this funding just 6 months? And my next question is, if we do not recoup the revenue, for the second 6 months, how do we afford the shift? Right? You don't buy a car without knowing you can't afford it. You don't buy a house without doing the same. If we're looking to take money from free cash or some stabilization account, which we know is not a fiscally responsible thing to do,
That's not been part of the discussion.
I'd feel better if it was, because at least there was a plan of where you look to find the revenue, right? If there's no plan, you don't do that. That's not a fiscally responsible decision. I'm lost for words as to why we would do a pilot program with $150,000, $200,000 worth of good town money that, we may not be able to afford in 6 months. We may have an issue. If you look at the escalated costs for benefits, for CBA wages, they're astronomical. I mean, our fixed costs originally went up 3%. Our revenue went up 3%. That means no room for added services. We can jockey the budget around is all day long, for that matter. And you can take from Peter to pay Paul, and you can let other departments suffer to fit one need. But at the end of the day, in a year, you're still not going to be able to afford that need. We're not going to find some pot of gold for revenue here. It's not going to happen. I mean, I'd defer to Bob on this. We talked about this last night. Revenue, we're not going to find an influx of $1 million in revenue to afford the wages and labor and staff that we run here. And pilot programs, in my opinion, are not the thing to try right now. If it was fully fundable, I feel that would be different, but it's not, and we've known it hasn't been.
If I could just comment, I think I've been here 5 months, and the one consistent comment from the Board of Selectmen at various meetings is that they want a second shift for the ambulance service. And I think when we sat down this afternoon, without any planning beforehand, that item came up again. And there's some interesting reasons for that. It's not just because the state is twisting the town's arm. This is the most important life safety issue facing the town. It is easily as important as police and fire services. There will be people who die on the way to Bay State or Cooley Dickinson if we do not have ALS service. Now, you can say that there is, on occasion, ALS service on the second shift, but here's how it works. The firefighter has to be, or the EMS person has to be at home. They're not on a shift. They're called, they have to go to the station, get the truck, and head out. I think most physicians will tell you that seconds count when you're dealing with a heart attack and a stroke. And I think that is what I've been hearing consistently from the selectmen, that this is important, particularly for seniors, as a life safety issue. And more people will be able to survive serious attacks if the town is able to do this. And they're struggling, clearly, to try to put something together. And I think I walked out of that meeting saying to myself that if the town meeting is to be persuaded, in this case the Finance Committee, if they're to be persuaded that this makes economic sense, more data is required. And I think the most important piece of data is how much more revenue will come in running an ALS truck versus a BLS truck, because the rate is considerably higher. And so what the town's going to be collecting there, and we don't know the answer to that because of all the factors that you've just cited. We don't know the answer, but clearly there's going to be significantly more revenue coming in, and the population of the town will have a vitally important service.
then I would ask you, Bob, to reach out to all the residents who have voted it down numerous times, right? I mean, it's been voted down 3 times. We look at it fiscally. If the money was there, it would be, it's a Board of Selectmen goal, it would be fully funded. But half funding, it doesn't make sense. And I fear what happens when we reach that point and we can't fund it. When another insurance increase comes in, when another, payroll wage issue arises. We have departments which are bare bones, and we're asking them to continue to operate on bare bones, as opposed to looking into creative ways of providing the ALS service, the fire and EMS service. We've brought it up numerous times. There are other options out there. We just choose not to look at them. We want the select board wants a second shift. But you're not doing the research into that second shift. You're not doing the research into what options are out there, into why it's fully plausible, into why a department will need to suffer financially with their budgeting to fund this, right? I would say sell it to the departments, right? That's what we talked about in November. This needs to be sold to the residents. It needs to be sold to the departments. This is something that we need to do. I haven't seen that. So with that, I could talk much longer, I'm sure. So with that, I'll move on.
So I guess just to throw some numbers out there, on average, we collect about $15,000 in ambulance revenue currently. So if you take the 15, because I think they're usually sending us the payments a little behind. So if you take whatever we've gotten so far up through November, minus what we plan on taking for the revenue side, which was $125,000, you should end up with $150,000. Just using averages, obviously, because that's kind of all I can go by the time November rolls around. So you will be able to take, if you decide, if this passes and you decided we want to do that second shift again, you're probably going to take, whatever, $70,000, $75,000 out of that ambulance receipts reserve account to fund that particular second shift again. But the problem becomes next year, and what do you do? But so this year, there's potential with just the ambulance receipts we've received so far. If we've continued to keep the same average up till November, you should end up with about $150,000. I mean, that's not guaranteed. I'm just using averages of what we've collected so far. So, for what it's worth.
And I got to say, Joe, I just got a comment. I think the last vote, missed by 10 votes, but that's not the point. I think sometimes we look at things in dollars and cents, and I don't know if this is a dollar and cents. If we don't collect as much money as we spend, I don't think that's the criteria that we look at. If it's going to save lives, it's going to have an extra 5 or 10 minutes on our response time. Somebody out there is going to, have a heart attack and be saved by that. I don't think we can say, but it was going to cost us $30,000 more than we earned. I think we need to figure out what's best for the town. I think sometimes that's what the select board has to do, even against what sometimes you hear from some of the residents. I mean, this is a critical function that the fire department and the ambulance service will provide. And if it's myself or somebody in my family, I spent 20 years in healthcare on the administrative side. My wife's a nurse. I've seen a lot of this close up. It's your neighbor, yourself. You don't care about the money at that point. It's got a service the town's got to provide. People come to town because we have great schools, we have safe place because of the police, we have the fire, and we have the ambulance. People come for the total package. They pay a lot of money in their taxes, and I think we need to provide the service that the people deserve. And even if it costs us a few dollars, I'll argue it to the end on this, but I think it's really important.
I do believe it's really important too, and you're talking about Mike getting more information. I will talk to the chief to make sure we get the numbers, revenue projections, and have him give you a report and publicize a report so that we really get into the nitty-gritty of it, exactly how much money we can get from the revenue, if that makes you feel any better.
I think it would be great if we stuck to the commitment from November of last year. That's what the original request was, that's what the original agreement was. I think that would be great. I think it's beneficial to everyone to see that information.
Right,
Thank you.
thank you.
I think it might be time to turn the lights back on. It's getting pretty dark in here.
Claire, can you flip the light over here?
Oh, no, here we go.
Okay. Really? We got everything outside. So
We got everything outside?
I'll bring it in, yeah. On the lighter side, we have pizza for everybody.
You want a 5-minute recess? Is that what we were asking
Yeah, that
for?
would be great. I could really go.
I'll just put it over here.
All right, 10-minute recess. We'll come back 25 of 7. Now, Southampton, it's about 6:35, 6:40. All right. Next line item of question.
Close to me.
I'm sorry? Yes, yes, as long as you stop me there before I...
Okay. Francine Tishman, Finance Committee. I mean, all the discussion about the need for information and data and the projections about how sustainable this is, my thinking is maybe as some form of compromise, do your trial second shift beginning second half of the fiscal year, beginning in January to June. That way, the town would have a better idea of what its financial position is. We would have time to collect the data that could be shared. It could help people make better informed decisions.
I like that.
Where would the money come from?
Wherever it's coming from now.
I'm still budgeted, just hold it off until January.
Because I guess the thing I don't know. I know it's in there, but it does give us a chance to collect the information for decision-making purposes.
And then if
Just
it
a thought.
works, we continue on into the next fiscal year after that.
Well, you would have some better sense.
It's a 6-month delay, but, okay.
I mean,
I'd rather that.
I don't know if anybody else agrees with me, if it makes any sense. I'm just thinking, if there still remain these questions, we have basically 2 weeks to get the answers. And
that's
again,
not-
we can't undo and go back to November because it didn't happen.
Right.
Going forward from now until that time when you make the decision whether or not we're going to go ahead with it, beginning in January, if it works and if we're in a financial position to do it, then we could pull the trigger on this pilot program. Otherwise, it's pretty, I think you're getting very mixed.
Yeah, I like that, I think that's.
Yeah,
a
to
good
start it and then stop it,
Does that make sense to you?
it would be better to delay the start and continue it if it works. I think that's a great idea.
Okay, but just a thought, right now, we're funding some extra money in there so that he could cover the second shift with some bonuses, I believe, with some increased amounts. Not a bonus, I'm saying the wrong word. Yes, standby or something, because we put extra money in there.
Non-call stipend.
Yeah, on-call stipend, he increased it. So that's not reflected here, so we would have to find out how much money that is, add that back into it. Otherwise, he's gonna go back to a BLS for 6 months, and we don't
Well,
want that.
there's the standby right there.
Right, but it's decreased, see it, 36.5.
But, no, we wouldn't, because all we're doing is we're just delaying the second shift will start for the second half of the year instead of the first half. That's all.
You need it for the standby for the first 6 months. So you need 18.
But it's there.
No, it's taken out, see right there? 36.5 is it.
36 covers the first half, and then it goes down to the next line for the second shift, and that would start in January.
I guess, yeah, 73 for the whole year.
Correct.
Hi, Janet Kane again. But if we're going to pay for the second half with ambulance receipts, then maybe we can utilize this money somewhere else in the budget if we're going to do the second. So anyway, it was just a thought.
Things are coming out of this thing very nicely. What do you think of that?
I wish the chief was here.
Well, I mean, All right, let's digest this. We're going to meet again next Tuesday on this to finalize it, so we'll give everybody some time to discuss it and see where they're going.
Maybe we can have the chief work some numbers for us. I don't know if it's a little late, but.
Okay, if we move forward? Hearing no comment. The next thing was the building inspector's salary. We've been trying to bring the building inspector up to 40 hours a week. That's what this adjustment's about. 38. 38. I'm sorry. Every time I think full-time, I think 40, but 38. That's okay. Any comments? She just told me that this is her last day on finance, so that she's going to be more mellow.
Monday, I'm still here
Till Monday.
But then she goes on the COA board.
Yes, and then she's in front of us with that. But anyways. Let's see. Okay, Vicki, you want to explain this?
Sure.
Thank you. This is not even red, it's actually gotten...
What line are you on now, Charlie?
I'm on 110, right here.
Got it.
111, excuse me.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So, vocational tuition, I talked to the business manager at the school today, and I wanted to get a feel for what the potential tuition costs would be for vocational tuition for next year, as the state has not, or the Department of Education has not set that yet. And in speaking with her, she spoke with Smith Vocational, and their tuition looks like it's going to be about $16,500. Currently, they have 55 kids that have been accepted into Smith Vocational. And they've changed the way they've done their sped costs. Previous years, they've had each child, and it was a flat rate of $4,190, but now they base it on a per service need. And so in speaking with the school, they anticipated an average of $2,500 per the kids that potentially might need that sped service. Currently, out of the 10th through 12th graders, there's 20 students that potentially need sped service. So historically, the numbers have not always been what the numbers in the budget haven't always been the kids that have actually attended Smith Vocational. They've ranged between 5 to 6 to 7 students that have not necessarily gone to Smith Voc from what the original 50 or 55 students have been when I looked over the past bills for the past couple years. So in calculating this, with the 55 that was in the original budget, I brought it down to 50 kids. So their original budget was $985. It's like $985, $580, something like that. And so I took around $60,000, which is approximately 5 kids, away from that money in order to, free it up for someplace else. That would still leave us about $1,200 to $1,300 over net school spending, which net school spending went up about $70,000 from last year. And the net school spending piece is the elementary, the school choice, the charter, the vocation tuition, and the indirect costs. So I think, history has proved that you know, we usually lose 5 to 7 kids per year between the budget process and when they actually go to Smith Folk, that we can comfortably reduce this number by 5 students.
Just so everyone knows, Chapter 70, which is the principal support that comes from the state of Massachusetts to cities and towns to aid education.
His mic.
Oh, to turn your mic.
Chapter 70, which is intended to provide state support for local schools, in part to offset the mandates that the state provides or imposes upon cities and towns, including a pupil-teacher ratio, for example, with SPED. Chapter 70 went up 0.6%.
We got about $17,000.
Yep. 0.6% in the coming year.
Any questions or comments on this?
What line are you on?
111.
Yeah, well.
Right, so as we discussed last night, the elementary school was plugged in as a level fund number just to bring down the budget to something balanceable. The note to the left says need to be reviewed. So I would ask that we confer with the school department and the school accountant on this, because level funding may not take care of all contractual raises. It would be good to know what the exact impact of a level funding budget would be, and if there were funds left over from, let's say, the fire department second shift for the first half of the planned first half, that maybe some of those be used to backfill the need there. I don't have the numbers in front of me for their contractual increases versus what they're asking for, but I'd be worried if we level fund and then they'd be looking at cutting a lot of services. So
We were told three employees, 3 teachers.
That was my thought. If you looked at their contractual obligations, are about $120,000 between last year and this year for just the teachers. You know, new level, and if their total budget overall increased $200,000 and 120 of it is most of that contractual, that's at least 2 teachers, if not 3, if you're taking $200,000 away. So don't quote that. I'm just taking objectively, teachers are about $65,000 a piece. If they've had a few steps and they've been there for a few years, just
So I would just recommend that this have more discussion with the school accounting department, select board, or the school department chair on how best to fund this. If there is, after we go through this exercise, if there is available funds, could they be appropriated there to maintain the level of services? Because as we've discussed before, a level service budget at a school is different than level services here, because every state mandate costs money. If we level fund a school, that means they decrease somewhere else, especially with the collective bargaining agreement increases. You know, I think after a conversation with them, whether it can be Vicky and Bob or you know, you have that communication line. If we have to entertain, it sounded like a 2.5 to maintain funding there, to maintain services. I think we should hopefully have that information by Tuesday, I would think, for that number there. I don't have all the numbers in front of me to divide those up, but it'd be an interaction with your accounting staff. So just fearful that if we level fund, that we'll have more issues than we expect. No.
The additional 200,000 isn't level funding, or isn't a current services budget. It included, I believe, 3 new hires. So.
Okay. Just a concern. Don't want to cut services there.
No.
Especially if we're not cutting services anywhere else in town. I think it's important to just keep that in mind.
Any other comments? If not, we're moving on to the highway department.
Heather Pellegrini, 76 Crooked Ledge Road. I'd just like to speak to the proposed budget on the school. As we look at everything in a whole, and Mr. Martin spoke about how important the funding for the schools is, I'm finding hard to grasp my head around the fact that we would agree to contractual raises 15, 20, 35%, and we're possibly looking at now cutting teachers at the Norris School to accommodate these raises. Nobody in this day and age gets a raise like that in 1 year. It just doesn't seem very responsible from a financial perspective at all. Thank you.
Thank you. The next is going to be Highway Department. The Highway Superintendent's salary, we are in discussion with this. There's no contract signed on any of this. The Assistant to the Highway Department, I didn't put that in. Vicki, you want to explain that a little bit?
So, last night when, you know, the discussion came up with the Finance Committee and the rest of the finance team about level funding, the number that was in the 17 budget was the original budget plus the additional amount for those extra 10 hours per week to bring it to 30 hours, which have not been approved, gone through the PPP board or anything for FY18. So I adjusted it to be the original budget from 17 plus the 2%, not the 30 hours, which she would be brought back to her original 20 hours plus the 2%, instead of doing it on the 30 plus 2%, because that.
So this brings her back to
her original 20 hours when she was budgeted for the, for 17.
Is there a reason why she's a separate line item and not just included in the wages?
Because Heather wanted that broken out last year. For some reason, I'm not quite sure why.
We recommend all separate positions be broken out just as a whole, so you can see where the funding's going for positions. And that's been something we push for from the Finance Committee perspective. You know, putting the admin assistant highway, for instance, in the general highway wages, it does skew it because the wages is CBA controlled. So then when you highlight rows like we do during this, you're going to see $17,000 captured in a CBA that is not a CBA. So that's why we like to break them out. There are instances where they can be combined, you know, for assistant clerks in those types of positions, but this one it just...
The problem you run into is that if you budgeted potentially overtime for your highway workers, but you needed overtime for your administrative assistant, now you have to go to town meeting to get that, instead of using the funds you already have in that big pot of money to manage however you may need to manage your department. That's all. But I mean, either way is whatever the discretion is.
You just answered his question, or his statement. It wasn't a question, it was a...
He just likes to get up, walk up behind you, turn around, go back.
That's exactly what he was going to say.
Okay. Highway building expense? Needs further review?
That was one that came up last night along with the town hall building electricity. And so I went again and took a look at those numbers, took an average of what we've been paying for all the utilities and the gas and the electric and the oil and miscellaneous items, and potential any problems that could come up in those, in the building, or, you know, with the electricity here. I think that was one of the other questions. And I did reduce that a little bit because there was no, I don't know, that question came up with the Finance Committee, and we can put that back. I just was re-looking at the averages and how we came up with that, and is it, because we haven't really spent all that much so far, so that's kind of where that came from.
23.
I think we have like $26,000 or $27,000. Yeah, but I.
So last year was the first year we broke that out, right?
Yes, it was.
Everybody bring their laptop up to the thing. So if you recall last year, this was broken out as a separate line item in my budget, and we put our best guess at a number in there. This 27, I have 27, 165.87.
That's what it was originally, which was a huge jump from 19.
So what I accounted for in there was, I read something that said there was going to be a 4% increase in electricity. I know other budgets have incorporated an increase for electricity. That is calculated in there. Water went up, nominally 38% for water bill, but it's a low bill. I had not previously paid for internet. That was covered through the town hall. Heather had broken that out and started giving the bill to my department, so that's an increase there. It's what?
It's already in this year.
It's in this, okay. All right, that's some of the places, some of the numbers.
We can put it back, I just was trying to get closer to where we think we might be.
Move on to the health department. The health department, it looks like a reduction of $70 or so. I don't know, I didn't put
No,
it.
it's a 2% increase from 46,000.
Yeah, what number do you have
Oh,
there?
I'm sorry, yeah.
Francine Tishman, I have no way of getting around to Vicki to ask her a question, so privately, so I have to ask it publicly. But I believe that we added $10,000 one time only in 17 for the health department. I did not know it was going to continue into fiscal year 18. Was that your understanding?
My understanding was that that potentially would continue if it got approved, but.
But,
Because yesterday's budget doesn't have it in it.
yeah, the budget that we worked on yesterday was at 36 from 17. So 2% of the 36 from 17 gets you to whatever the figure is for 18.
And I believe you're absolutely correct. $10,000 was.
Then that's my error. I just, like, when I was going through, I was trying to, figure out.
So are we reducing it by 10,000?
This is discussion right now. They're gonna have to work this out for next Tuesday night so that they know where they're at.
Good evening. Jerry Swanson, Health Director. Actually, when we got the $10,000 at the special town meeting, I believe the chairman of the Finance Committee said, well, if you need that money, make sure it goes in the budget for next year. And that was just so we could get through the end of the year. And I'm still going to get furloughed for another week. There's not enough money in that budget, and I've said this for 2 years. So clearly it'll be up to the people if they...
If I may, when the Board of Health submitted their budget to the Finance Committee, did it include the 10,000?
Yes, actually,
Way more
we
than that?
asked for more than that. I have submitted the budget actually 2 years ago and told the Finance Committee that the Board of Health budget is about 27% below 2006 allocations. We have never, that department's never been brought up. Every other department's moved along, so I'm sure you can understand when, and the board hasn't seen this budget, they're not going to be overjoyed. Especially since we're bringing in, and we've worked hard to bring in some revenue, and none of it will be going to the health department. It will be going to every other department for wages. So you may want to think about that.
So the original budget for the health department was an increase of $27,926 from FY17.
Increase over the 36,000? Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Had it increased from 2006 until now, that would put us on an even keel with other departments. But there's been a revolving door there, and we've had people in and out, and it just simply hasn't been adequately funded.
On to the next one.
So just as a follow-up, to Jerry's comment, at the meeting, yes, we did recommend that if you feel the funds would be needed, put them in your requested budget for FY18, if you feel it was needed. The budget that was presented to us, as Vicki said, was different than more than just the 10. During last night's exercise, as we did with all departments, we level funded plus 2%. You know, so it was across the board from what we worked on last evening. We did not propose changes, you know, for instance, the contractual raises. We took them right out and added 2% to the previous line. That was how we attacked the budget last evening. So we took the same consideration with the health department, with the building department, with the town clerk, all those offices. So, you know, any changes going forward, you know, this is a different approach than what we took last evening. So if there's a proposed change or a proposed increase recommended, I would ask that it come from the select board, because, you know, our idea last night was a little different than how we're moving with this now, so.
So where are we at that one, Charlie? What's in the number?
Well, the new number is 47,535, according to what I'm reading.
Okay.
That's 2% of the
Yeah.
46.
Okay.
But it was 36, so the 10,000 that was approved at town meeting, made it 46 for the rest of this year. So this number is different than what we had last night as well. We approved 2% of the 36,000.
So what was your number last night?
And I'm not saying right or wrong or making a judgment, I'm just, it was 36,603.36 with a 2%. That's what was, so that, 36,603 was, plus the 2% was 37, yeah. And I'm not saying 37,335.43. And I'm not saying, but it just changed from last night to tonight, so that, I'm just putting that on record, not making any judgment one way or the other.
Now, the yellow lines represent the programs we're going to defund and shut down?
You did that on purpose. She's got your number, Charlie.
She's used to the abuse.
So due to certification on the library, we did not want to touch or modify line items without the library here, because if we reduce to a certain level, they lose certification and it drastically impacts the library. So we wanted to have library representatives here for this discussion.
Well, we have the library representatives here, so this is, I guess, their opportunity.
Yeah, so is that what's over here? Is that what we're looking at?
I have no idea what you have in your hand.
It didn't change, Barbara,
It didn't
from what
change.
you
Yeah, that needs certification. Right.
Barbara, you need to come to the podium.
Do I have to?
Yes.
Yeah. You want to say hello?
Barbara Golden, Library Director. Yeah, this would, the book budget is one of the things we need for certification. So, yep, that was right. That's the amount we needed. And then the overall budget does give us certification. So I noticed that we were cut in a couple of places. Vicki, did you think the electricity would go down with the HVAC? I was wondering about that, or whoever put that. Reduction in the utilities. Library utilities was reduced, but we did get the HVAC upgrade. It's almost done this week. So I don't know, but I think it'll work out. I think this will work out.
It takes a year in Southampton to get this.
So some things were reduced and some things were increased. We asked for a raise for our children's librarian because she was making less than a lot of people who start out at this town. You know, she was making $15.61 an hour, and she has a master's, and she's been working there 2 years. And she's been. We went through the whole personnel policy board, and she was regraded, and the salary matches that. So some things were raised and some things were lowered. But it does give us certification.
These give you the lowered and the raises right here.
So we're going to have to be much more careful with expenses. That was lowered 1,000, and the utilities were lowered 3,485. But we did ask for the wage increase for Johanna and more for books for certification. Maintenance was raised, because it's an estimate, and if we use less, then it goes back in.
So Barbara, these numbers, the raise and lowering, that's not what you submitted with your budget?
Right. Yeah, those weren't what we submitted. Let's see, do you think it is? Let me check.
Yeah, should. Yeah. So we thought that's what you submitted, Barbara.
Let's see, expenses.
No. The answer is yes, but I'm not going to eat one.
Well, 28, the books are what we asked for, and the payroll was what we asked for. I need a calculator because it was maybe broken out differently. Do you have a calculator?
Yeah. Here, Barbara. Barbara. Here you go.
Let's see.
I knew they weren't getting time. He went for himself.
Vicki?
Here's the library.
What? Pass those out?
Yeah. Barbara, here's your original letter.
Okay. So it's exactly what, I guess I was thrown off by the minus sign. 11,000 is what we asked for. Yeah. What? 718. Yeah, it is what we asked for.
So the reduction.
I don't know why the reductions happened. Why it was minus 31 minus. Was it compared to last year?
Yeah, that's just that. You're looking at column S, is what you asked for.
Okay.
And so your library expenses went down, your materials went up, your utilities went down.
Okay.
I think because of the HVAC.
Right.
And then maintenance would include, I think you have a maintenance agreement?
Yes, we
with
do.
the HVAC?
Right. I'll have to go back to the library and use my calculator, but yeah, it looks good.
Thank you.
Is this what the finance committee believes is accurate?
Yeah, we haven't made any modifications. We highlighted it at the beginning, and did not touch it.
All right. Do you wish to amend it? Wish to move this? Okay.
No. I mean, to be honest, I can tell you that I understand the need for how they budget. I don't understand the entire process, so, I would ask if there was a need to reduce something, that,
I've been working
the
with Barbara
conversation.
for a few years. I
between
still
Barbara
don't
and- yeah.
understand what goes on, but I just work with her.
Sounds like this is what she
You want
submitted.
to talk about that?
Yeah.
Oh, is that what it is?
All right.
The numbers got switched.
It's not maintenance.
All right, I'm going to move on to Memorial Day. Jackie,
Yes.
microphone.
So, Vicki, I'm looking at the Memorial Day, the $100 for the flowers. Yeah, I mean, this year, we should be good for,
That was what was requested.
that's for next year.
Been putting money aside to take care
Really?
of the flowers, so that this will never be discussed again.
Yeah, there's $200 in the budget for 18 for Memorial Day.
But how about this year, 17, there's nothing?
Nothing.
This year's-
Got cut last year. All of those got cut. Conservation got cut, CDA got cut, Memorial Day got cut, all of the little ones got cut.
So we're good with next year with $200, right?
Yes.
I can't believe.
So
we're
you're
even
going to still
discussing
do that?
That was a big,
Yeah,
that got cut last year.
Oh, I tell you.
So we have nothing this year for it. It's It's a
There's
shame.
nothing this year. This year, the Boy Scouts are gonna be paying for it.
Oh, they are, okay.
That's my understanding. No? I'm wrong again?
No, you're not wrong again. There is a different source that's willing to come forward and pay for this.
Okay.
Okay? For this year.
This year. All right. Well, employee benefits, all the rest of that, that's pretty much locked in. Finance has reviewed it.
I think it's important to go over the major increases in those benefits, just so everyone's aware of where some of the larger hits are coming on the budget.
I totally agree with you, Mike, and I hate to put you in a position, but seeing you're more versed than I, would you?
Donna is really good at this.
Is Donna willing to come to the podium? You notice how the pizza sort of cut the edge on the whole meeting?
You're welcome.
So, the contributory retirement, which is what we pay to Hampshire County Retirement, is a fixed number. We get the number given to us. There's an actuarial study done every year, and the towns are just given a number, so we have no control over that. Workers' comp is actually not my line. Unemployment, we're pay-as-you-go, so we only pay if somebody files a claim. So that's just the 10,000 has been in there right along for a number of years. If there's this year we haven't paid out much, maybe $500-600, but there have been other years that claims have been filed, and so we need to keep something in there. The group health insurance is going up, the rates. The rates only went up slightly, but we kind of have more retirees now than we did. The retirees are increasing faster than they're dropping off.
Well, that's
Way
a
to
nice
put it.
way to put that. Yeah.
So we have more retirees. Sorry.
Send them pizza.
The regular health insurance for the active employees,
Just look at the amount of money that we pay out
right.
in health insurance every year.
Retirees, it drops to 50%. Everyone else is active employees are at 70%. And we're part of the Hampshire County Group Insurance Trust. We have very good rates. For 5 years, our rates did not increase at all for 5 years. Last year, they went up, I think about 6.8%, and this year they went up. The biggest increase in cost for insurance is prescriptions. Prescriptions have gone up like 200% every year almost in the last 3 years. It's just astronomical how much the prescription cost is. When you break down, I'm on the executive committee at the trust, and it's amazing how much we pay in prescriptions. So the increase of the 111,000 is not only, the increase in the plan cost, but it's also more bodies. Right. And we have no control over that. So Medicare is just, the 1.45% that we pay on all gross wages. So that has to go up a little bit every year because our wages go up. The life insurance, our rates have stayed the same. That's the group life we offer benefited employees a $5,000 plan, and we pay 70% of it. I think it's like $4 per employee who has the that per month, something. And the retiree we pay 50%. So I don't know anything about the insurance and the workers' comp. That's Bob.
Hey, Charlie?
Yes, sir.
We brought it up again, I think it was last meeting, short-term disability. We were talking about maybe putting a placeholder in this budget.
Yeah, we're talking like $15,000 to put aside to take and actually buy insurance.
Right.
We've gone back and forth with this numerous times, you know, and all the rest of that. The problem is, where's this $15,000 gonna come from?
Well, we thought it would be saved because now we have that 75% for how many weeks if somebody is out?
26.
26 weeks, and they can go out for 26 weeks, come back for a week, go out for 26 weeks. So is that correct?
It's, the selectman has the ultimate authority on that.
Right, but if a doctor's note comes in, it's kind of tough. So we thought that would more than compensate, because do you remember the number that we pay out for that benefit? The 26 weeks in the last fiscal?
Depends on the person,
No,
because it's 75% of what they're.
I'm thinking the last fiscal year, for instance.
I did not understand.
Yeah. But I thought it was pretty close, and it provided a better benefit for all the employees.
Donna,
We'll get it next week.
would it be possible to look that up,
Yeah,
and then
number
next
next
week, when we take it to the warrant, we'll see if we want to put this in or not? That makes sense?
Excuse me, just a point on that, Jan.
Who are you?
Gary Swanson, Southampton Board of Assessors at the moment. We've had a recent experience with this, and it actually came out of the department wages rather than out of a separate fund. I think everybody should recognize that sometimes that can be a very, telling.
It strips the budget.
It strips the budget entirely, and you can't provide the services that you want, and I think we got to think a little bit differently about this.
That's why it was brought up, because this will be out of a general budget, and the cost was so low. And it provided, I think, 65% of the wage. Was that right, Jim?
It
What were we looking
was, let me guess, I think it was 60%, but if you pay the tax and the premium, then you do not pay taxes on it, so it's,
Pre-tax or post-tax?
puts you in a better position.
Yeah.
But the question came up, I heard, is if you have an illness and you are out for the 26 weeks and you come back to work and you have a reoccurrence of the same illness, it may not be covered. So that's something I heard about. I was going to check in on that, so.
On the short-term disability?
On the short-term disability. So we're going to find out about that, because that could be a negative if you have a cancer of something and you have to come back to work, then go back out on it. You may not be able to do that, so. I was going to check on that.
Okay.
Vicky Morrow, Pomeroy Meadow Road. So in a discussion when we were talking about that today, when that incident, that question had come up, the other thought to think about is, if you're going to put $15,000 or whatever that number may be in the budget for this disability insurance, you can put that line item in the budget and pay those people who you're going to pay 75% to out of that budget line item. And if you don't ever use it, it just falls back into free cash at some point. So it's just a thought, like if you take an average over the past 5 or 6, 7, 10 years of what we've paid out, you put that in the budget, because if you want to put the disability insurance, you're going to put it in the budget anyway. And if no one uses it, then we lose that money. But if you put the, whatever that amount may be in the budget, pay those people out of that one line item, that 75%, and if there's 10 grand left, well, then that falls back into free cash. If you don't use any of it, you might need more, but if you can kind of gauge some sort of a guesstimate of what the average has been, then maybe you do it that way, just a suggestion.
Self-insure.
Yeah, but separate line item, if you're
Right,
going
a
out of a
separate
line
line
item itself, not out of someone's budget.
Right.
If you're already going to put that money in for potentially some, disability insurance from another company, I guess why not reap the benefits if you don't use it?
And that would help a department that has maybe 3 people that go out on disability. They're paying all that out of their budget, so it would help.
Absolutely.
But just a thought, just to throw that out there.
It's almost like the workman's comp line. You put an amount in there, you have no clue until it happens.
You
so.
don't, no. So, but just a thought.
Sure.
Heather Pellegrini, Crooked Ledge Road. I just wanted to bring up, in regards to the health insurance, we see that's a really big number. Bob, at our meeting last night, suggested we put that out to bid to see if we can possibly recognize some savings on the health insurance plan. Probably a good idea.
Yeah, and we did talk about, so it's great you brought it up. And to get that moving forward, should we officially put a committee together, at least, not necessarily with people on the committee, but actually say we're going to put a committee together and it's going to study this and put out the bid. We also talked about now we're at a 70-30 split, which is, it's okay, it's not great, but it's not low. But there's also the opportunity to look at PPOs and indemnities and HMOs and offer a menu program to the staff, because some would be very happy with an HMO where it costs less, it saves them money and it saves us money, where others may need a full indemnity plan or a PPO plan. So it gives the opportunity for the staff to say, here's what I want, here's what I'm willing to pay. It gives them a lot more leverage. Now they have to take what we give them, which is a high-cost plan, and they have to pay that 30%, which they may not need.
Yes.
So, I mean,
establishing a committee definitely, you know, it would be responsible because it's so varied and there's so many things that you have to think about in order to find another company that can fulfill all our needs.
Yeah, I just generally think it's a good idea to bid all your contracts regularly. I've probably been convinced by Donna that we have the best plan, but it's worth doing. And secondly, what you may find is that you can reconfigure the existing benefits with the existing company in order to affect some savings. What's very clear is that the town simply can't, regardless of who the people are who are joining the system, the town can't sustain that kind of increase.
and I think we want to make it clear that we're not doing this to take benefits away from the employees. We want to give them more opportunities to save money and have benefits they want.
And I think building and liability insurance is also something that should be bid. There's also the police 111F, the police and fire 111F that ought to be out.
You want to put that on the agenda for the select board for beginning of June?
Okay.
Because we're never going to do it in May with town meeting. Okay? Donna? The debt service, do you want to?
Excuse me, Charlie, just one other consideration on the insurance. We are, at this point, charging full boat. We have an aging workforce, and some of the people that we have working for us are eligible for Medicare, but we still charge them full boat rather than.
You don't require, the town doesn't require those that reach Medicare eligible age to go on Medicare?
Not when you're actively working.
Oh, if you're actively working.
Actively working employees
Right.
have to be on an active plan,
Right. But
not
when,
a Medicare supplemental plan.
but the town has adopted the regulation that will require those who are retired to go on Medicare when they reach that age.
Yeah. My only point is for active employees that the town can save, as can the employee, simply by purchasing a supplemental plan, if that's available, rather than full boat. You know, if somebody
I believe that's the Blue Cross.
Beg your pardon?
I believe that's the Blue Cross. It's not the town that makes up that, it's not the town making that up. That's the law. Active employees are on active plans. If you're retired, you're on, and you're over 65, you're on Medicare and supplemental plan.
As an active employee? No.
If you're an active employee, even if you're 75, you have to be on what they call an active plan, which is a single HMO or, you know, a +1 or a family or whatever.
Okay, guys, we're getting off topic.
We're beating it to death.
Okay, debt service, principal and interest. Does anybody have any questions? It's pretty much what it is. Are we retiring anything this year?
Norris?
Well,
This is what, 135?
in 18, right?
Yeah, so you have, so after this year, it'll be done, well,
Right.
this year and 17.
Right.
What calendar, 18 it'll be done?
Yeah, you can see the numbers
So
there.
really, that was a little bit more than the proposed, if there was an override proposal for the school budget, it would be less than what
the tax would be so close that you shouldn't notice much on your tax bill if the override passed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that 135, so that's going to run the entire year? It runs right to the end of the year, or is it going to be a partial of that?
No, it's the whole thing.
It's the whole thing, okay.
What's the $1,000 for fiscal 18 or?
It went up to just.
Oh, that's just the difference, okay.
Okay.
And I think the Hampshire Regional Edition is done in 2020, but I have to double check with the school department, but I think it's 2020, which would be $200 and some odd thousand.
I think you're right.
Which is our portion of that, would be the 56% or something like that.
Humper Tinker, what's the? I'm still paying that out.
Want to get into revenue projection?
Francine Tishman, Finance Committee. We didn't have discussion, and I'm trying to look through my notes to see where the line item was for emergency management. But for the past several years, we've only funded it at $250, which is extremely inadequate. It's equivalent to zero. I happened to meet in Vicky's office one day, the emergency management director, who had a very compelling argument, and not in a negative way, but I mean, explaining the situation. Should a natural or man-made disaster occur, that we have basically no resources available to this man who is very experienced and could really be an asset to the community and to its residents in the event of such a disaster. He has office space here in Town Hall. It has no phone. It has no radio, no computer, no software, no maps, no reference materials. So he was talking about, actually, to bring it up to speed to bring it to a certain level of functionality. He was asking for $7,500. I don't know that we can afford to add that to the budget at this late date, but we kind of buzzed by that line, and I didn't want to not mention it at this time, but somewhere between $250 and $7,500 would be a consideration. And I'll speak on his behalf. I think he's, I don't think if we do something, we have anyone to fill that position at this point in time.
Are you recommending we fund more?
I'm recommending that we give some consideration between now and whenever, what is the best case scenario we can make on behalf of the Emergency Management Department for the town.
Did he say what he would do with that?
Yeah, I mean, I have a whole letter from him. I'd be happy to.
Maybe you can email it to the board?
Want me to make
Yeah.
some copies?
Do you have it?
You have one?
Because
Okay.
he just handed me that right now.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Or maybe you can scan it tomorrow, Vicki, and send it
Oh,
out?
yeah, I'll scan it to you and send it tomorrow, that's fine. That's
Thanks.
easy enough.
So in regards to the emergency management, I know I personally brought this up when we discussed appointing someone and we discussed their budget. It could have been 2 years ago. So in an emergency situation, and Charlie knows this, there's an incident command system that is set up. Generally, that incident command system is run by one individual, right? Because without proper hierarchy and order, that's not going to work properly. You're not going to be able to respond properly. With the utility company, we work with the incident command systems. We have our own, and we work with local incident command systems during major events. I've always had, and this is on a personal level, apprehensions about a separate emergency management director. Because if you think about it, in an emergency situation, you have someone who's not fully connected with the town at all times, and then you have a police chief, and then you have a fire chief. So you have a struggle over who runs the incident command, especially if there isn't a good relationship. I did mention this before. I will recommend this, that we look at having the fire chief, who does serve this role, as the incident command during emergency management situations. And maybe this is something that could be incorporated into his role, but I think it allows for a better system because it's someone who works here full-time. It's someone who is fully invested in the town, knows where all of the things, the parts and pieces are for that emergency situation. Because the most important thing is one person giving an order and that order being followed during those situations. And when you separate it out and you have someone who's part-time / volunteer with a minimal budget, there's going to be lapses there. So just as a recommendation, I know we're talking about funding it, as a discussion this year, but it should really be looked at, especially with a town this size, because a town administrator or a fire chief or a public safety commissioner, in my opinion, those should be the people running that because they're here all the time. They know who to call and they know where to go, which is very important during those situations.
You want me to chime in on this?
Yes, please.
All right. Prior life, my role was to respond to emergencies and disasters in the Commonwealth. I would partner up with our current EMS director, and we would work together as a team. I was the enforcement side, we'll say. He was the side that will put the linkage together. What I've seen in the towns that I've responded to is when you have a police chief, fire chief, highway superintendent that becomes the EMS director, or not the EMD director, basically what happens is they focus on their department and lose track of the other departments that are functioning in the town. When you have an emergency director, that emergency director is supposed to be looking at the town in its entirety. I agree, having a part-time volunteer person doing this does not fit or work well in any of these communities. Typically, when I'd get involved in these things, we found the town manager or the town administrator was becoming the key person of contact, and they would be taking the lead, and the emergency manager was basically assisting. Until you got to the level of like Springfield, where they had full-time emergency management staff and all the rest of that. Mike, I have no real solution with this. It's a small town, and that's part of the problem. $250 is not adequate to do anything. Even our Code Red system that we have, we've been chasing grant money to try to fund that every year. I have gone to MEMA and have asked for funding to see if there's any grants available to help us with this program. There is none. That's expected of the communities to fund this. I don't have a solution, but I also feel that we should put some money in there, even if we just put a couple of $1,000s, but something.
So my question to you, in an emergency situation tomorrow, who is the incident commander? Is there a system already set up in place? I don't know if we have an emergency response plan in town, but
You should have a number of emergency response plans in town. They're mandated by MEMA to be established, so they are here. Prior history in Southampton, the emergency manager was shared by the 3 department heads: highway, police, and fire. It didn't help with stuff that required dispensing of medication and stuff like that. The Board of Health was sort of the orphan stepchild when it came to things going on. No offense to you, but that's the reality of what we used to see. Don't have a solution, but if you had an emergency in town tomorrow, the incident commander would be the first person on the scene. That's ICS 100.
Okay.
It then ramps up until you get the people at the administrative level.
Okay.
The incident commander at the first incident is the person on the scene.
So if, I would just ask, we are discussing a new town administrator going forward. We have, increased the pay scale for both the police and fire. I think it would be important if we move in a direction, like you had mentioned about one person being the commander and the emergency management director, that person working with them, and we kind of developed a plan going forward, because I think it's good to fund the position if we're going to have valuable things come out of it. It's just it'd be good to have a plan, you know?
My understanding at today, the emergency manager is this individual, the alternate is the fire chief.
Okay.
That's what you guys appointed
Right.
2 years ago.
Right.
Okay.
And I seem to be the de facto contact when,
Okay. You know, I've been in a lot of emergencies. One of the key positions is, an officer doing public communications, particularly now with email, text messages, websites. The public has become far more demanding of information in the middle of an emergency. So if you have an incident commander on the scene, I think it works best if that person has a cell phone connected with someone at town hall, maybe the board chair of select board, or maybe the town administrator, who can sit there at a computer and pump out information to the press and to the residents to keep them informed of what's going on. If you don't do that, even though you may handle the emergency very effectively, the public will be very unhappy because they're in the dark. So that kind of, and used to be you had folks sitting around a table with all these phones. Not anymore. It's just cell phones, having a way to keep them charged, and having a way for one person with a cell who is on the scene, usually the incident commander, communicating with somebody in town hall where they have access to communications equipment.
and the other part to this is, we have no one trained in this town hall that knows what Web EOC is. And that's the primary link for MEMA.
Yep.
You have public health Web EOC. You do not have MEMA Web EOC.
Right.
That's correct. Except this individual. Except John.
Yeah,
He-
Don is.
Don has, but if Don doesn't have a computer or a phone or anything like that, we have, okay?
But he has the experience, and he's definitely.
Oh, it's not-
Yeah,
I'm just
he could
saying,
handle this. We just need to fund at least, you want 7,000, how much, 7,500? I mean, right, let's at least do that.
All right,
Absolutely.
let's move on this. We're gonna discuss this, and next Tuesday we'll make a decision. But I hope that, that sort of gave you an idea of the fact that we are missing a big piece here.
Yeah.
Okay, now that I got all over this place here, is there anything else we need to cover on the budget? I always enjoy this Halloween storm.
So I just want to recap for, I guess, everyone's information, for our information. So we have gone through the budget as a group. We have come up with some follow-up items. One of those items being town administrator's salary going forward. So that incorporates 9 months of a new administrator, along with the cost of an interim administrator during those 3 months. So that number should be reworked. Let's see, just running down the list here. That's at the bottom. So we discussed the second shift for the ambulance service to be a second half of the year test pilot, or test, so that we can determine the revenue, if it's funding, if there's funding available, to see what the ambulance receipts bring in. So that would be a second half of the year start.
Would you continue that as level funded from last year?
So it was,
Were you gonna put in the budget 6 months?
right, so
That's my question.
the conversation was, I'll recap and we can obviously chime in. So we discussed having it act the same for the first 6 months, and then the receivables, which we were estimating and hoping to be able to fund that shift, to then fund the shift in the second half. So we would essentially level fund the first half of the year from last year, and then you would
Transfer the money in the second half, depending on
Yeah, so you have to level fund the entire year, and then you would use the receivables to fund the extra. Right. So expense-wise, it would be, yeah, level funded for the year, and then revenues, okay. And that includes, you know, some of those line items are obviously dictated on the second shift. Some things that were in here, and this just caught my eye, the medical IV pumps. So when we went through this exercise last night in level funding, if it was an ad, we level funded it. The medical IV pumps are not listed here. I don't know if that's a definite need for the start of the year, if it's something that can be funded through another,
I cut it in half, thinking 14 was for the whole year, 7,000 was for half the year. It was just kind of the estimate there.
okay.
We're not sure, Jim and I was talking, but they might be mandated, so we'd have to ask the chief on that one.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
So, and I don't know if it's something through operations stable, it's something else that could be funded. I don't remember all the background to that.
I suspect that that's a mandated requirement for the paramedics, so that they have the equipment there to do that.
And it very well could be. Is it, let's see, going down the list.
How many were there in there? Was it 2?
It was 14,000, but I don't know how many that would be.
I think 2 sounds right.
I'm thinking one
for each ambulance?
each ambulance, yeah, so that's what makes me think it's mandated.
Now, does-
Upgrade to the equipment. I think it does some
Yep.
monitoring that we can't do now. And it's an AED as well.
Moving on to the elementary school. So we discussed that the line item here is level funded, but more conversation between Bob and Vicky should take place with the accounting to make sure we capture increases. And, you know, we do not lose services at the school, essentially. Doing what we can with saved revenue and other items, or saved revenue and other items to make sure we maintain the level services there. The highway, I don't think we had any comments there. Health and Human Services, so the 10 was looks like 10,200 was added in, then plus 2%, so 2%.
So you want to keep that, or you want to put that back to the 36?
I mean, it was our direction, if it was something you feel that's required to operate the department, to put it in as the proposed request. Like I said before, when we worked last night, we level funded plus 2%. This is in addition to what we had originally proposed last evening, so we take it as a select board suggestion on moving that budget.
Yeah, this is not final by any stretch, Mike. What we're hoping is your committee can go back and do a review this week into next week, so that next Tuesday we can nail this down and be done moving forward.
We covered the library,
Yeah, that library.
and then we covered the benefits.
You're going to close those 2 numbers.
Yep. Those were I think the major items. I'm assuming Bob and Vicky will kind of go through this and double check and then resend out later this week. Okay.
My vote. All right. So we're closing the discussion on the budget.
Tammy Walunas, 298 College Highway. My question is in the education, and it's kind of towards the finance department. Does the Hampshire Regional Operating and Capital, do those numbers equal the budget that we had, that was proposed from Hampshire?
That should be.
Okay. I just wanted to make
Does it
sure,
now
because,
look right?
Really?
well,
I can go
it didn't
through
because
this
it went
and
down.
highlight any changes since the
This
last
one went
version,
down.
if you'd like.
You didn't
Yeah,
change
we
anything?
didn't change those.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure, because I knew
Yeah.
it was higher and,
It should go down.
okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, it should go down.
We're done with the budget, but we still want to go over the warrant articles that have come to light, so that the Board of Selectmen and you guys see the changes, so that we are ready for next week. It's not that we're going to decide on them. Would everybody like to take a 5-minute break, just to stretch?
Sounds good.
All right, 5-minute recess.
Hey!
Everybody ready? Welcome back to the Board of Selectmen's meeting for April 25th. It's about 5 minutes to 8. We're now going to review the articles for the annual town meeting. Most of these articles we've already reviewed.
We have.
So as long as everyone agrees, we're just going to move right to the ones that are new.
Okay.
Does that work for everyone?
No change in the first 5 articles, including the very long
Very long.
Wetlands Protection Act.
That my understanding, Jackie's going to read.
Yeah, exactly. We got it all figured.
And then, if I can get to Article 6. Article 6, there was a slight amendment to the dog law. Not substantive, it's page 18. Nothing on Article 7. Article 8, right to farm.
Wait a minute, what's the change on Article 6?
We added Section 6, Section 7. I don't believe we had that in there before.
Broke them out?
Yeah.
All right.
Nothing substantive. On the right to farm, please note that this was a boilerplate article, but the town has added the disclosure notification, Section 4, so that someone purchasing a home will be informed that this is a community that values farming and that presumably you should expect that roosters might wake you up in the morning if you're moving too near to the farm, where there might be some odors and so forth. But that, in effect, keep your eyes open. Keep your eyes open when you buy a home if you don't particularly like some of the effects of farming. But the town values farming more than they do new residents from other parts of the world who want to come in, okay?
Hey, Bob. Bob,
What?
Leave it that.
Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
a question on that. It says no later than 21 days after the purchase. A lot of times, the right to get out of a contract is like 10 days or 14 days. So
Yes.
we may disclose it, and the people can't get out of the contract. So
Yeah.
should we have it sooner?
This language was suggested by town council, so I didn't change it. So,
Who's going to notify the residents?
pardon?
Who notifies them?
The seller.
Tell her.
It's supposed to be part of disclosure when they do land transactions.
Yep. And we added, since the last time you saw this, we added first offense, second offense, third offense, fines, 1, 2, and 500.
For your own amusement, Donna, years ago, I got called out to a town because they were complaining about a pig farm. I pulled up a number of the deeds of the residents, and every one of the deeds said that you're buying property next to a pig farm.
So, on the marijuana bylaw, I took out the first section, which was called the purpose. If you read that, it's like a newspaper article. I don't think that's appropriate to incorporate into our zoning bylaw. If you take a look at the old copy, it's the wrong language to go into a zoning bylaw. It was a justification for the marijuana bylaw, and I think it's very appropriate to be used in the motion or in the summary, actually, to explain to people what you're doing. But you don't make that explanation in your zoning bylaw. So.
Question on it's a zoning.
Who are you,
bylaw
sir?
change. Gary Swanson, East Street. It's a zoning bylaw change which has certain requirements.
Right.
21-day notice
Right.
periods, public hearing.
Right.
Has all of this been done on this, Bob?
Yep. I don't think the ZBA has met on it. No, they haven't.
This would be a planning board, I believe, right? Bylaw?
The planning board has to hold a public hearing,
Yeah.
has to make a determination.
Right,
There
correct.
has to be
You're
a
right.
21-day notice
You're correct.
before we can act on it as for the town meeting action.
So we strike this and just make it a town bylaw.
That can be done.
Yep.
If it's appropriate to make it a standard town bylaw. I don't know, Jim. You would have a better idea than I. whether
I would
that
just
should be
think
a
just the
zoning
opposite,
bylaw.
that K&P drafted this, KP Law drafted this. I don't know why they drafted it as a zoning bylaw. It has nothing to do with zoning at this point. It's merely a moratorium
Just a
on
bylaw.
retail sales. It ought to be just a bylaw.
Then I would suggest we call it
Okay.
a town bylaw.
Okay.
Strike the word zoning.
Yep.
Okay?
And this is only going to, if enacted, this will have a moratorium on retail sales only for a 3-month period. The Commonwealth is not going to start issuing permits until April 1 of 2018.
But it also looks a little funny. It's if you strike the word zoning, it doesn't seem to be right, because we're amending what? We don't have a bylaw, so how can we be amending a bylaw we don't have?
We would add a bylaw.
So we have to reword this totally.
Yeah, I just have to reword, amend the town's bylaws, and then you'd add a section, and that's all.
But if you look at
Okay.
temporary moratorium, it discusses zoning bylaws and structures and establishments, so this meant to be in the zoning bylaws. I don't think we can just take a couple words out here.
Well, bring it back to KMP
Yeah.
and just get it tweaked for next week. We'll see where we're at.
All right.
Because if it's going to zoning, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Heather Pellegrini, Crooked Ledge Road. I'm sorry, I have to hit the rewind button for a second on the right to farm. It looks like there's duplicated paragraphs. If you read through, on page 21, it seems like that right before section 5 is just a duplicate of what's above it, above the first, second offense stuff. But that really wasn't my question I came to the podium to ask, though. I know that there are certain neighborhoods that have deed restriction covenants, sort of preventing farming, preventing horses, different things like that. So how does this come into play on this whole right to farm bylaw?
My understanding is this is just a statement of the town, that it doesn't restrict anybody's properties.
So a legally filed, recorded
Okay, yeah.
covenant for a neighborhood would not,
I'm not an attorney, Heather, but I don't believe it has any effect on any of that. It's just a
not see how it
statement
could
of the...
supersede. Okay, is that true?
Don't quote me on that, but I think there's some amount of land you need to have a quote-unquote farm.
For chapter land.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's going to apply to this actual bylaw, though. I wonder if we should ask legal that question, if some document, if some language should be in there referencing if there's superseding, like if there's if there's covenants that supersede this bylaw, perhaps it should be, because I'm speaking, specifically from my new development, I know that we've got restrictions on that, and
This
why
bylaw-
should I necessarily have to, spell that out in a purchase and sale when they can't even farm in that
This
neighborhood?
bylaw doesn't supersede a covenant in the deed.
Okay, that was the question, I guess. Okay.
Can't do
So
that.
would we still need to spell that out in a P&S, or
You could have bought a farm, you could have a lot that still above the farm.
could be behind, so yeah, we would
Yeah.
have to, okay,
You know how many abutters I have?
yeah, okay.
Seriously.
Just making sure I got
Yeah.
it straight.
I got to meet all of them during the brush fire. Yeah, they were all excited.
Yeah.
Myself included.
Okay, and the marijuana one you're gonna.
Okay, the marijuana, Bob's gonna
Yeah.
tweak and check.
A prior year unpaid obligation. You may not have seen this one. This was
Oh,
relative.
that's a new one.
Yeah. This is compensation for part-time police officers that was overlooked last year.
We have no funding source.
Yeah. So this is one of these nine-tenths votes.
But you have to put a funding source on there. There's no funding source.
Right, correct. Where are we going to take it from?
It's your choice. You can take it
Have any
from
free cash
free
left
cash.
We do.
Well, there it is.
I think that's where we took the regular police officers from anyway.
We did.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Then you have the annual operating budget and pay for
Yeah, Mike.
salaries for elected officers.
I just have a question, just time-wise. So this is a cost from FY16, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so this is a negotiation, okay, that's what I was,
Yeah.
I thought it was some, I'm just trying to track down
When
where
they,
it
when
came
they
from.
calculated the reimbursement for all the officers, one of the officers, they erred in math. That's a simple way of saying it. That's,
And because it's police and fire, you can retroactive more than one fiscal year because this is per statute.
Next is the annual operating budget and fixing salaries for elected officials. The next one is new, the general override for the Norris School budget. I put a number in the article because I understand that's the way it's done in town. Some places don't put numbers in the article, but they put them into the motion. So I put the figure 200,000
what article is that?
in the article. That's Article 12.
Oh, all right.
So I just want to,
No. That's 14.
You don't have the new, this is the new one, Charlie. That's,
Yeah, we're looking
you have
at
the
our
wrong one
paper.
up, I think.
12 is the override, and what
Yeah.
I got.
Yeah.
The paper copy has this article, which I added today around 4:30 in the afternoon, so.
Oh, well.
so with, so with Article 12, after the review of the school committee budget, I would think you would discuss this article with whoever proposed it, in terms of, do we continue with the article, do we reduce the article, do we increase the article? I just want to confirm that that communication will be there for this one. Okay.
Yeah, we might have to make that adjustment next week, depending on where the
Right.
finance committee recommends.
Okay.
Well, not just what we recommend, also based on the school's need. Just
Correct.
because we weren't aware of the article, so we don't necessarily know, I mean, we understand the gist of where it's coming from, but the background behind it. I just want to make sure the circle gets closed with the author and the person who put the article forward.
Next article was added late this afternoon, also at the request of the chair of the school committee. She asked for the establishment of a Norris School Stabilization Fund to pay for unanticipated special ed requests, special ed expenses that were not anticipated in the budget process. It is hard to predict what your sped costs are going to be, especially in the spring when you don't know who's going to appear at the school door in September. So there will be no money into this stabilization fund. It'll merely be created. I would presume that if they have any unspent funds towards the end of the fiscal year, they might try and set aside some of those funds, transfer them into the stabilization fund.
And
The new rules from the modernization law, municipal modernization law, it only takes a majority vote to transfer money in, still takes a 2/3 vote to transfer money out of any stabilization fund. Transfer station enterprise, nothing's changed there, nothing's changed with the water department. Nothing's changed on 16, 17, 18, although if we go ahead with what was discussed this afternoon, we might want to take that transfer out.
Well, when we were talking Vicki Morrow, Palmer Meadow Road, when we were talking this afternoon, we thought instead of transferring the $25,000 to the stabilization to reduce the cost of the ambulance that we would borrow, we would put the whole $125,000 into the general fund budget to pay for a piece of that first 6 months for the second shift. So if we are not going to do that first 6 months and we're going to wait to do it the latter of the year and take the money from ambulance receipts reserve, at that point in time, we might want to think about either putting that $25,000 back into stabilization so you have some money to offset the loan for the ambulance, or we can keep it in there and then 25, I mean,
Move it in January,
yeah,
if you have to.
Yeah, so leave it in there, just scratch
Just
this
leave
out.
it there, I guess, yeah.
just leave it the same, okay.
Sounds good.
Also, I'm not sure if you've seen this one, but this was also brought into me by the accountant. Transfer $57,000 from stabilization into the health insurance budget. Actually, this wasn't the accountant, it was the treasurer who pointed out the shortfall. Yes. Nothing we can do there, got to pay. Transfer of free cash to stabilization, I just put down there sum of money. If we have any funds left over in free cash, and we don't transfer them to a stabilization fund or some other place, they get washed out at the end of the year. So putting them aside in stabilization would seem to make sense, but we don't know at this point how much will remain. So we can identify the sum of money in the motion. You've seen 21 before, 22, 23.
21 to sign.
Yep.
I've tried to get quotes, I haven't gotten any quotes. I would suggest striking that article for now and looking at what we might have for free cash in the fall.
Okay. 5-year contract for police copier is not new. Revolving funds. I'm sorry?
Is there a dollar amount, or?
It's in the budget.
Yeah, understanding was, it's just because it's over 3 years.
Yeah, this is just getting a 5-year permission from the town meeting to do this.
It's going to be less, I think, than he pays now.
I'm sorry?
It's going to be less than what he pays now.
Yeah. Revolving funds are the same. We did look into a request from the COA for a revolving fund for donations, and that does not fit with the statute. You must have a revenue stream that you earmark into a revolving fund, not a series of donations.
You can set up a gift fund, which we have.
We can set up a separate gift fund, yes, sure.
Other departments have gift funds if you want to make donations.
Yeah, we can do what they want to do, but we just don't do it with a revolving fund. Yeah.
I think we could get her a lapel mic, and that way there, I won't be catching hell because they can't hear her.
The CPC articles are basically the same, although I did add the boilerplate, the annual boilerplate that sets aside money for administrative expenses plus reserving 10% for the 3 areas where they are permitted to spend. Transfers from operating stabilization for the police cruiser and for the ambulance haven't changed. Town roads, the same. Acceptance of Bissonnet Circle I added because the planning board voted last Thursday, I think.
Wednesday, yeah.
To lay out Bissonnet. That's now Article 37.
Yeah, no, that's pronounced Bobcat Hallow.
It's
Hollow?
Hello.
Hollow.
Too much pizza, man.
We always said holler in Pennsylvania.
I got that.
Do you know which way it is?
Yeah, I gave you the plan that had, it's written on the plan I gave you.
Yeah.
If you can read it, it was.
No, I think that is
Yeah.
an error.
Yeah, okay.
And the water projects are the same. I just took the motions out. I left the motions in there for the first couple of versions because we were going back and forth on how to clarify to the public and to the town meeting what was meant by a 2.7% borrowing and also the Clean Water Trust borrowing. So now that I think we have the right kind of language to clarify that in the motion, I took those motions out.
And possibly the last page may change. We don't know.
The what?
The last page.
Oh, yeah, author it.
Names, people. We don't know what's going to happen.
Oh, yeah, if you're going to sign on May 2nd.
Right, that's after the
Yeah.
election.
Somebody's guess.
If you think this is basically what the warrant's going to be, I'll start preparing summaries and motions, and might be able to have them next week. So you could look those over as well, even though this is what you're going to post. We have plenty of time to work with the motions.
Any thought from finance about this?
I don't have any at the moment. I mean, we'll have it as an item at our next meeting.
Yeah.
But if there isn't a glaring question at the timeframe, I don't see anything out of the ordinary.
The nice thing with this is if we do find something 2 weeks after the fact, we can make a motion on the floor to amend it if we have to, if the town moderator allows us.
This would have to be posted 1 week prior to the 16th, and to be safe, I would say post it on the 8th. And so we have until May 8th to make any changes. Well, we actually have until the selectmen sign it to make any changes, but we can also tweak motions up until later. I think it would be a good idea, though, to get the motions squared away in early May so they can be posted with summaries on the website so that people have a better understanding of what we're trying to do here.
Robert?
Robert Floyd, 15 East Street. Do know that 6-7 years ago, the Select Board voted unanimously to post the warrant for the annual town meeting 2 weeks before the annual town meeting, even though legally in the Commonwealth it's 1 week.
Oh, I didn't know that, no.
That's all right. Select board can change its.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're not talking about a bylaw, we're just talking about a vote of the
Yes.
select. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. If they vote this warrant on May 2nd, we can post 2 weeks ahead. So,
Okay, are we done with this section?
I think so.
Okay, then I'm going to move the meeting forward. I want to thank the Finance Committee for their diligence in this, and we'll see you
Your patience.
next week.
And all their patience.
And all their patience, yes.
No,
Oh,
you're all
I-
so patient and kind, I know it.
They do, they do.
You never get anybody who agree with either finance or select board.
It's a lose-lose. I mean, you're never going to have enough money to fund everything.
I should just keep
You're never
arm's
gonna make
length from
decisions that
politics.
unanimously everybody
Yeah.
likes.
Yeah.
But let's get back to the meeting, okay?
Right.
Documents for signature. I signed the warrants for April 20th, PD 17-42, $43,789.34. I signed another warrant for, what do you call it, April 20th for P 17-42 for $254,558.60. That's it for warrants. Now, the next thing is a minutes approval for March 21st. It says 2007. I'm hoping we're more up to date on our minutes than that.
We've already voted on these earlier.
We did?
Yes, you handed me the blue.
Okay, so
folder.
that's been recorded. Selectmen's meeting, next meeting is May 2nd, 16th, and 30th. Please remember, annual town elections, May 1st. from noon to 8 o'clock, if memory serves.
Right.
An annual town meeting is May 16th, possibly the 17th, depending on how things go. We now are going to have open time for the public, but I'm not going to read the entire thing. Is there anyone here from the public that would like to approach the podium? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Everyone's evacuating.
Can I just say something to the board? We're going to post 4 sets, we're trying to catch up on minutes. We're going to post 4 sets of minutes in Dropbox, probably tomorrow, if we can get it done. We have them done. So if you could look them over, and we'll put them on the agenda for 2nd of May.
Okay.
Very good. We are now going to move into executive session, and we are not going to come back into open time. Under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21, Item 2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel and to collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiation with non-union personnel. Roll call vote.
Sears, aye.
Konecki, aye.
Martin, aye.
Labrie, aye.
So done.